arcade game. And when I say multiplayer, I mean you've not seen a game like it. Because while in single player it can get boring rather quickly, with friends there's hardly anything comparable to it in the fun department. Especially if you keep in mind that up to 10 people can play together on a single PC. How is that feat of computing Jedi mind trickery achieved, you may wonder? Well, by use of USB hub and 10 cheap USB controllers, preferably 2 per cable. And if 10 seems like a bit too much, I agree, it kinda is. With that many players, the game is literally crazy chaotic, and any kind of strategy that you usually employ in Bomberman-like clones is mostly moot until there's like 5 or 6 of you left only. Before that, the unpredictability is overwhelming and you'll be focusing on surviving more rather than anything else. Still, when there's 5-6 of you, it's short of magnificent. I think that while I've been spitting out words here for a good minute, I still haven't really said anything about the game yet, have I? Well, in my defense, I assume that everyone knows what Bomberman is. But on an odd, 1 in a million chance that you don't, let me try to explain. It's basically a versus multiplayer single-screen arcade game where each of the players controls one Bomberman, and they have to use bombs to kill each other. Bombs explode sending horizontal and vertical blast waves of fire, which can change their size during gameplay with use of power-ups. Explosions also remove destructible walls, often uncovering bonuses of various kinds, like extra bombs, stronger explosion blasts, ability to throw bombs over obstacles, ability to kick them, and that's just an odd few out of many more. Naturally, the last Bomberman standing wins, and when you killed off, you stay that way until there's a winner. It may sound basic, simplistic even, but whomever played any iteration of the game with at least 2-3 others will tell you that it's a blast. Terrible and way too literal pun obviously intended. If you often play a game with friends locally, you know, on a couch like we used to back in the day, and don't have a video games console, then this, along with Worms, perhaps should always be in your gaming rotation. Period. Betrayal in Antara is a fantasy role-playing and a follow-up to 1993's Betrayal at Krondor. It doesn't follow the predecessor's story or even use the setting though. Instead, it starts a new tale, set in a different world of Ramar, in kingdom of, you guessed it, Antara. The game begins on the ship that William Escobar, son of governor of city of Pianda, is sailing on to meet with his fiancée. The seas, it seems, are not friendly to our young noble, and the ship is attacked by pirates. During the commotion, William, along with another traveler, manages to escape in a lifeboat. The traveler, however, ends up being mortally wounded. And just before he dies, he entrusts William with a mystical medallion warning him of a conspiracy against the entire empire. A little while later, William meets a young and talented magician Aren, whose recently manifested power is unexpectedly huge, and after sharing the news with him, they both decide to seek William's father's advice on how to deal with the unsettling information and how to stop the sinister plot. The story takes a while to gain traction, but is overall pretty decent and rewarding to complete. The dialogues seem a bit off though. Hard to tell why, but they seem a bit out of place. As if they were written as an afterthought that was added to already completed plot. They're not bad enough to detract you from playing, but they tend to take you out of the experience from time to time, which is always unpleasant, especially in a role-playing game. Gameplay-wise, Antara is very similar to Krondor, a carbon copy of it really, allowing you to take full control of a party of 3 adventurers. Movement around the world takes place in first-person perspective 3D view and is real-time. Whenever combat occurs, however, game switches to a third-person view and turn-based format. The battles are very tactical and as demanding as they were in the original, and always happen in pre-assigned locations and dungeons, no truly random events in Antara, which is good for some and a criminal omission for others. The engine seems to be taken straight out of the first game and polished slightly for the new age, but I wouldn't say that the graphics are much better. Krondor used popular at its time digitized presentation, Antara gets back to more artistic, hand-drawn RPG roots. That said, the quality of in-game assets is very varied, and they can as often look great as they can terrible. If you can put up with all that though, there's plenty enough RPG, story and fun combat to keep you entertained all the way through. And if you persevere and complete the game, you may find the ending to be rather satisfying. Hexen II is a medieval fantasy-themed first-person shooter and a third game in Heretic and Hexen series. It still takes place in the world of Firion, which was raided by the trio of demon brothers collectively known as the Serpent Raiders. 2 of them were defeated in a previous game, so only one, the most powerful of them all, Eidolon, remains. And he's especially cool and deadly. To get to him, however, you'll need to defeat his 4 horsemen of the apocalypse, so his 4 generals first. The game world is stylistically varied and features 4 unique areas of medieval European, Mesoamerican, Egyptian and Greco-Roman themes. Each of them is composed out of interconnected stages between which you'll travel back and forth completing environmental puzzles and defeating hundreds upon hundreds of enemies. Fortunately, enemies don't respawn after being defeated, so traveling between far-off switches shouldn't put too much strain on your mana resources. Mana that is used as ammo/fuel for your magical weapons. Same as in first Hexen, there's few classes to choose from, and this time they're the Paladin, who has a lot of vitality and specializes in melee weapons, Crusader, who's very defense-centric and with progress will even gain ability to heal himself, the Assassin, critical strike and sneaking master, and finally a Necromancer, rather weak physically but eventually able to regain his power from defeated enemies' warrior. Each of them will get access to 4 unique weapons throughout the game and class-specific skills upon some of the level-ups. The weapons can be powered up by acquiring so-called Tomes of Power, often unlocking new and more damaging attack patterns. Since Hexen II tries to implement role-playing elements into its loop a bit more than previous games did, attributes of all 4 classes raise upon level-ups, and level-ups themselves are based on accumulated experience points that you get for killing monsters. It's not often that the sequel is better than the original was, but in the case of Hexen, that's precisely the case. It looks better, it sounds better, it's more varied and feature-rich, and most importantly, more fun to play. So if you like FPSs and RPG or fantasy-themed games too, it's definitely a title not to miss. Disney's Hercules, dare I say it, is one of the best licensed movie tie-in games of the 90s, perhaps in the top 3. Bold statement, I know, but you can't really dispute personal opinions as these are like asses. Everyone's got their own, and it's more important to them than anyone else's is. Hercules generally follows the plot of the movie more or less, and places you in the shoes of our demigod, soon-to-be full-fledged superhero god Hercules. Why superhero? Cause if you think about it, he kinda was. Ancient perhaps, sandals wearing, that's for sure, but superhero nonetheless. So, you play as Hercules, son of Zeus, and the physically strongest man in the world in his time. Your task, should you choose to accept it and play the game, is to complete series of heroic deeds and overcome various obstacles to prove your strength, courage, and most importantly, that you deserve your spot at the Olympus. To become one of the gods and not puny demigods or mortals even. Hercules is an action-adventure that mixes gameplay styles and even genres a little too, to serve a very exciting, action-packed and most importantly fun title that gamers of all ages can enjoy. So, some levels see you running in side view fighting off buddies seeking for pickups and countless hidden secret areas, like in a typical for the time platformer, while in others you racing down the road collecting items and avoiding enemies, or doing something completely different. You never know what and when to expect with Hercules, and it's precisely what keeps the game fresh all throughout. Not to mention bosses which are just fantastic, beautifully designed and animated, and really fun to beat. So the variety is definitely one of the strongest points of Hercules, but so is its presentation, which for the most part looks as if it was taken straight from the movie and never fails to have you impressed with its details and stylistic choices. Disney's artists' talents were definitely not wasted on this one. Sounds and music are impressive too, but not as immediately noticeable and straight in your face as the graphics are. The controls are rather easy to learn and master, and our hero has a whole range of attacks and combos that he can pull off, and can also obtain upgrades along his adventure, like a helmet of invincibility or swords of lightning or fire to name a few. To summarize, Disney's Hercules is beautiful, incredibly playable title that the whole family can enjoy, young and old, thin and fat, smart and not as much, everyone. And thanks to its variety in levels, bosses and tons of secrets, it's also one of the games that offers a much longer staying power because it doesn't feel as repeatable as most others in the genre do. Mortal Kombat Trilogy is my third most favorite 2D Mortal Kombat, after first and second respectively, and the only other than the first that I really enjoyed completing. I hated single player in the second. Computer cheated, and it's been proven more than once. The link to one of the cases will be in the video description if you're curious. And while I don't mind the challenge, having played against the CPU that actively plays ignoring the game's inner mechanics and rules that you're always a subject to, is not fun. It was great against a friend, let's make that clear, but not on your own. Anyway, since we're on the subject of the trilogy and not any other, it's obviously a 2D versus fighting game combining characters from the first 3 titles for an ultimate fighter matchup of the 90s. And you can play as literally any of the characters that we saw in previous games. So Kano, Sub-Zero, Scorpion, Liu Kang, Johnny Cage, Raiden, Sonya, Reptile, Baraka, Jax, Kitana, Mylina, Kung Lao, Shang Tsung, Sindel, Sector, Striker, Nightwolf, Shiva, Smoke, goddammit, there's plenty of them. Rain, Jade, Ermac, second Liu Kang, because why the hell not, Noob Saibot, second, this time unmasked and less lore-friendly Sub-Zero, Cyrax, second Smoke in Cyber Ninja form, whatever that may mean, Cabal, Goro, Kintaro, Motaro, Bolo Yang and Shao Kahn. and only one of the last 4 former bosses is not in the game. Can you guess which one? He may have been a unit in his own right, but definitely not present in the series in any shape or form. Each of the included over 30 characters have their moves, fatalities and looks sourced from their own games, and they play as well as they originally did. Backgrounds are also a combination of old and new and are as fantastic as the cast of fighters is. Objectively speaking, the Trilogy is the very best 2D iteration in the way too long by now running series. Personally, I love the first game the most, but I'm biased towards it, and this bias is fueled with gallons of nostalgia and familiarity, and nothing else really. If I was to metaphorically stand aside and compare them all, Trilogy was the best, at least when it comes to variety, features and responsiveness of controls. One thing that it fails at least in my opinion, and sadly that's also a very important thing for me personally, is the atmosphere. I just feel nothing when playing Trilogy, as compared to the first 2 titles that not only gave me shivers with their very climatic musical tunes at their respective title screens, but also captivated with their intros. In first, with the story and genesis of the tournament described on a Goro-themed background, and then short clips of all fighters playing out their moments of glory. And in second, much simpler, with the starry sky and slowly starting storm, cutting through it with lightning and leaving Roman numeral 2 in the dark blood red coloring. They were both short and not sophisticated in any definition of the word, but epic feeling inducing in the same time, if that makes any sense. Oh, and obviously the sound design of both is something I will never forget. But if I was to go off my memory only, I could not tell you nothing at all about Trilogy's startup splash title screen or the accompanying tune. I have literally no idea how it starts or sounds. All that aside, personal feelings especially, Mortal Kombat Trilogy is a really competent, fun and bucketfuls of blood spilling fighter that will no doubt keep you and your friends entertained and competing for weeks on end. Or will end those friendships over a disagreement who'll get to play as Sub-Zero in the first hour. Both options are equally as feasible. Star Wars Jedi Knight Dark Forces 2 is a sequel to 1995's Dark Forces, you know, the FPS Star Wars game, and takes place directly after the events of the movie Return of the Jedi. It is also still predominantly a first-person shooter, but with an option to switch into third-person mode, which is an interesting but generally speaking unnecessary addition. You play as Kyle Katarn, a former mercenary and an ally to the rebels who discovers that he has a potential to become a Jedi. So he embarks on the quest to find a lightsaber and learn the techniques of the Force. In the same time, evil Lord Herek, who's responsible for the death of Kyle's father, is searching for a quote-unquote treasure of his own. A mythical Valley of the Jedi where, according to the legends, his Dark Force powers could be unleashed in full. Unlike most other shooters of the time, Dark Forces 2 isn't linear, but offers a deep and engaging branching story backed by an excellent source material. So while perhaps there's no really meaningful choices to make in the game, it doesn't feel like it's a one playthrough type of an experience, as it branches out and allows for a solid dose of replayability and even multiple endings to boot. While you spend most of the in-game time shooting, you'll eventually be able to wield the lightsaber and even gain access to a plethora of Force powers. Like Force Choke, for instance, which is hella fun to pull off, as you can imagine. And since we're on the subject, there are 3 kinds of powers that you can learn while playing. Light, naturally, as that's what most Jedis use, dark, because they're deadly and fun, and neutral, so that there's a balance in the Force. Light Force is mainly used for healing, Dark is for various attacks like the aforementioned choke, force throw of objects and the likes, and neutral powers enhance and expand your set of physical abilities, like speed, jumping, etc. Interestingly enough, while there are 14 powers in the game to learn overall, if you decide not to mix them and only focus on one of the 3 paths, you'll be granted a chance to learn an additional bonus Force power. Dark Forces 2 is chock full of video sequences with live actors that complement the story and push it forward. Overall, Jedi Knight Dark Forces 2 is an excellent title, a gem for fans of Star Wars, and a decent chock full of action shooter for others. So, whether you're a fan of the saga or not, it's worth a playthrough. FIFA Soccer Manager is EA's very first football manager, and while it may not have been feature-rich enough to compete with giants of the genre, I don't think that it ever aimed to. I believe that it was made to be more user-friendly, easy approachable, and fun, to lure those who were vaguely interested in a subject but never managed to get through high entry point of games like Championship Manager and the likes. But just because FIFA Soccer Manager was made to include non-hardcore fans and newbies in its circle of potential players, it doesn't mean that it was deliberately made bad, lacking or boring. In fact, I kinda liked it. And if I'm to be honest, from time to time, I'm happy to put away my spreadsheets and just have fun and go for something that will not squeeze the last drops of processing power out of me. So, FIFA Soccer Manager offered 12 leagues in 5 different countries, 4 divisions in England and 2 in Germany, Italy, Scotland and France. There are also over 7,500 players in its database, many from outside of playable leagues, so that the international competitions could be simulated. And your team can be improved by both training of existing players and purchase of the new ones too. There's quite a few tactical options in the game as well, like ability to assign players to any position, setting of the team orders and playstyle and coverage of each of the positions. It's perhaps nothing new to the genre, but definitely a welcome inclusion for a more newbie-friendly title. The matches can be either simulated instantly or observed in an isometric view with all the players following their orders and assuming positions correctly. Even more so, the match engine featured 8,000 frames of animation and over 120 different plays to depict the on-pitch action more accurately than any other manager did to date. And that's something that is often overlooked when talking about FIFA Soccer Manager, but definitely worth acknowledging to give it justice. While FIFA Soccer Manager focuses on management, dropping most business sides of the genre entirely, it strangely enough gives a lot of attention to the stadiums with its included Stadium Builder. It features over 300 individual different pieces that can be used, allowing you to customize your grounds to your heart's content. From tiniest of stadiums to huge monstrosities of few 100,000 seats in total. It's interesting, though if I'm to be honest, largely unnecessary addition and something simpler would suit the package better. FIFA Soccer Manager is not a game hardcore fans of the genre will go for, and since they're a rather vocal offshoot of all gamers, I'm sure that they're ready to complain about it for hours on end. But if you look at it through eyes of an inexperienced footy fan, it can be quite fun, even if a bit demanding. The second half of the 90s was still a time when Activision was known for creative and fun games and not controversies and toxic working environment for which it is infamous currently. Well, also a Microsoft buyout, but that's a subject for another video. And to be clear, I'm all for it. Interstate 76 is perhaps one of Activision's most unique outings for the time. In essence, it's a Mad Max adjacent scenario set in alternative 1970s US in a post-apocalypse-like setting. According to the game's plot, sometime before the game's grim present, US government failed completely. The states fell into ruin because of the global oil crisis and the rest of the world soon followed. American Southwest became the wasteland ruled, controlled and raided by various motorized armed gangs. You play as Groove Champion, and your one and only mission is to avenge your sister Jade's untimely demise at the hands of one of the gangs. Having inherited her custom-built Picard Piranha, a fictional name plastered to a car you'll no doubt recognize when playing, you turn to vigilante justice and aim to bring pain and suffering to the responsible, preferably in a healthy mixture of both before killing them eventually. The main story is divided into 17 entirely scripted missions and set across open-ended trackless areas of the wasteland. To unleash the destruction worthy of your personal mission, you'll naturally need to arm and upgrade your vehicle, and you can do that with various numerous weapons, turrets, grenade launchers and mines. So you know, the answer to a question what every car in Mad Max needs. Interstate never aimed to be realistic, to follow the history or rules of our world, but it more than makes up for it with its unmistakably 70s atmosphere, bucketfuls of it in fact. The game's alternate 70s are all about the music, muscle cars, flashy clothes, and era-specific gestures and behavior of all the characters that you'll meet and interact with. The game uses 70s from all its ones and zeros, and does a hell of a job of that. It's a pleasure to witness and to play. Especially that Interstate 76's style perfectly integrates with its story, mixing numerous cutscenes with interesting and well-fitting context-wise missions to create a coherent story of revenge shown through the eyes of our protagonist, Groove. What's worth noting, even if it has nothing to do with the plot, is the pretty decent game engine that simulates handling and collision physics pretty accurately, at least for the time that the game released in. So, if you enjoyed those types of post-apocalyptic dystopian experiences, there's probably only few other of a similar quality released in or around 1997. Hellfire, aka Diablo Hellfire, is an expansion pack to your prior single biggest hit and an all-time cult classic, Diablo. And even though it was not developed in-house by the Blizzard themselves and outsourced to Synergistic Software, it turned out to be a bullseye too, and a pretty fun addition to already excellent base game. Interestingly enough, Hellfire did not require you to have a Diablo installed on your hard drive, and all it needed to run was the original Play CD in your optical drive. And by 1997 it was a good thing, as the game was rather large and hard disks weren't exactly cheap. Hellfire adds 2 new dungeons to the game, the Demon Crypt and Festering Nest, and updates the base game with most of its new features, like new items, weapons, spells, enemy creatures and bosses. The Demon Crypt is where the demon Nakrul resides, a former lieutenant of Diablo, now evil in his own right, terror of all nearby areas. And the area is as beautiful as it is creepy, well fitting into the overarching Diablo's art style. The Nest is an insect-stylized hive-like dungeon filled with theme-appropriate enemies and a new boss creature called the Defiler. It may not be as immediately fitting graphically addition to the game, having strong sci-fi inspired vibes about it, but it's a welcome, even if a bit out of place, refresher in terms of its presentation. What's more, Hellfire adds a new player class of monk that uses staff weapons and is pretty good at an unarmed combat as well. He's a decent caster to boot too. Other than that, there are also oils, adding special magical effects to weapons, and runes, which can be used as area of effect traps. Finally, the expansion unlocked Nightmare and Hell difficulty levels for single-player mode, which, while not necessary per se, was a welcome addition for veterans of Original that wanted faster leveling and more challenging gameplay. While it's obviously advisable to create a new character for Hellfire, you can theoretically import your old one from base Diablo. The choice, however, comes with a pretty prominent inconvenience. The characters are moved to Hellfire without any weapons or gear whatsoever, and all that they have with them are their levels, XP and gold, which can speed up the progress within the add-ons content, but it's far from a perfect solution. Hellfire sadly is entirely devoid of multiplayer of any kind, and can only be played as a side adventure from within the single-player Diablo playthrough. It's disappointing, but should provide plenty enough fun to the fans of the original that they won't mind too much it not being a shareable experience. In the end, if you love Diablo, you'll love Hellfire, but if you didn't, it's not likely to change your opinion about it. Since I don't know how to pronounce the title of this game correctly, with its AE joined into a singular letter that, whichever way I try, I can't comprehend as anything else other than the A, like Fonz used to say, I'll call it the Dark Angel. It also sounds way better than anything else that comes from my mouth, so let's leave it at that. So, Dark Angel is a side view 2D run and gun platformer with mixed fantasy and sci-fi themes. The Azrael and his army of demons plunge the world into total chaos and are striving to bring it to an end. Why does he do it? I suppose he can, and it's Sunday and there's nothing better out there. The real reason will forever remain unknown. But fortunately, regardless of his motivation, there's one hero that never gives up and will stand in Azrael's way to stop him and bring his reign of terror to an end. You. Well, not you per se, but Karina, the titular Dark Angel, who you'll be in control of. And truth be told, she's pretty well versed to do that, if I say so myself. Not only she's a master of any and all weapons capable of firing deadly projectiles at high speed, but also possesses a series of powers, unlike you've seen today. So there's the Mutator power, which allows her to transform ammo into medikits, and vice versa. Then there are Psychic Attack and Reflection. First is powerful offensive skill, and second reflects enemy laser shots. Teleport Coin allows her to instantly teleport to where it landed after being tossed, and finally, Energy Wave damages all enemies near you, kinda like Bomb does in most other arcade games. Dark Angel is controlled similarly to much more well-known and arguably a lot better abuse, so you move with the arrows and aim and shoot with the mouse, which, as years of gaming have proved, is a very comfortable and precise control scheme. The levels are rather large and full of hidden secret areas that you'll need to find passages to, often in the least expected locations. So keep your eyes open, and if something looks like it may lead somewhere, even if its surroundings don't support the notion that that somewhere may be there after all, investigate the hell out of it anyway. It may not be a coincidence. Dark Angel is awful looking. Today, it didn't age very well. But back then, it could have probably been called attractive. Still, if you're to approach it now, I'd suggest not expecting too much from the presentation and just doing it for the gameplay, which in itself is not great too, I'm afraid. At least initially, as Dark Angel is a game that requires a bit of time investment before you begin to appreciate it. So, should you do it and try it out? I think it's best that you decide based on the footage and not have me in this particular case advise you about it. Personally, I don't see myself coming back to it ever, but I can imagine how someone else might. 3D Ultra Minigolf is a, well, sort of three-dimensional multiplayer take on minigolf. It features 18 holes that can be played either as front 9, back 9 or all 18 at once, and up to 4 people can enjoy it at the same time, in head-to-head mode or tournament, and either using click-to-hit control method or hold and swing. So if you're familiar with one more than another, you're not gonna be at a disadvantage. And while I've sadly never played either golf or minigolf in real life, I know it's unheard of, I love most takes on them in computerized format. So, whenever a new game tackling either comes out, I usually try to at least check it out. Objectively speaking, Dynamics' take on minigolf is hella fun, and Sierra, being the publisher, had a true banger on their hands, even if it's pretty niche kind of a game and hardly one to be very profitable. That said, 3D Ultra Minigolf is simple enough so that virtually anyone capable of holding a mouse can play it and enjoy it, but in the same time, mastering it to play it on competitive level, telegraphing your obvious superiority over your soon-to-be ex-friends, requires a lot of skill and practice. So, whichever type of a gamer you are, there's something here for you. Each of the halls has its own unique theme and design and is presented in beautiful for the time 3D pre-rendered graphics, all accompanied with well-fitting sound design. So yeah, presentation is a bullseye with this one too, if you don't mind the constantly switching between the viewpoints camera and the fact that the halls are not rendered in real time. And despite the fact I enjoy playing the game, I hate the pre-rendered approach to most games. This one's no exception. And I would take any, even crude real-time render backgrounds over the pre-rendered ones in a heartbeat. That's me, however, and most people are not as sensitive to this kind of a solution, so do not base your decision on trying it out on my subjective feeling about it. Age of Empires. Na-na-na. Na-na-na. Yep, the Age of Empires. As those of you who've been following the channel for a while probably know already, I don't really like RTS games. That said, I've spent dozens upon dozens of hours playing AoE and don't regret a single one of them. It was a real-time strategy equivalent of gateway drug. If someone didn't play them and tried it, they were that one step closer to converting. And while I managed to resist the urge to, I still played it maniacally for quite some time. Funny enough, not the campaign even, but in the sandbox mode, most of the time using built-in map editor to create various, often unimaginable starting conditions. So at times I had a lot of resources around me, more than I could ever use, and at another I divided the map so that all players could only meet in the middle at a small choke point that they shared between them. Some epic battles took place there, I'm sure I don't have to tell you to imagine. I've built maps where I had a virtual fortress, an incredibly easy to defend and difficult to capture spot. I've created scenarios where every player started on a separate island or even their own pockets of resources with nothing at all between them, like a post-nuclear wasteland of some kind. Point is, I've had as much fun creating different possible imaginary scenarios as I had playing them later on. And that was what made me fall in love with it. Not for very long perhaps, it was not a romance of ages, but long enough to memorize it all and remember to this day. That's why I believe Age of Empires is easily one of the best RTSs ever made. Cause it was good enough to involve someone who's actively despising the genre into spending countless hours playing it. And if that's not a feat, then I don't know what is. Anyway, let's talk about what the game is, since I failed to do so until now, instead of blabbering about how much fun I had. Age of Empires is a real-time strategy taking place between 10,000 and 2000 BC and giving you a chance to control one of 12 ancient nations, each with their own unique strengths, weaknesses, special technologies and units. All that in 4 campaigns split into 36 individual missions or in a sandbox mode. There are many different winning conditions in the game, but whichever the mission sets ahead of you or you aim for in a sandbox, you cannot win without having any army at all. So, even if you're not going for conquering of all opponents Alexander the Great style, you have to build a strong enough army to at least protect yourself. Said army can naturally be upgraded with a rise of new technologies, and given the plethora of units, it can be built to defend, attack or be a mixture of both. Other than that, Age of Empires follows a typical for the genre formula of erecting various buildings, some military, some otherwise, finding and exploiting of different resources, researching new technologies and expanding with time, peacefully or otherwise. And all that on a near perfectly balanced maps, with fun environmental and strategic challenges built right into their design. Well, I misspoke a little. Stone, or lack thereof really, is nearly always an issue with Age of Empires on included maps. Graphics are a masterpiece. And while they're only presented in an isometric 2D, it's clear that a lot of attention was put into everything, from small seemingly unimportant units like wild animals even, through all of the flora, resources, to armies and buildings, and even the over-encompassing it all interface. There is pixel-perfect care put to everything, and Age of Empires looks stellar even today. Not to mention FMV sequences between the missions, which are Blizzard level of quality good. Sound and music design are both no worse. Tunes are nice and well-fitting, and all units when selected or issued commands to answer you in their own language, adding a little flavor to this already tasty package. To put it bluntly, Age of Empires rocks. But it's not without its issues. No game is really, and AoE is no different. AI, and especially the pathfinding, is some of the worst for the time. and while it was fixed with the follow-up, in original it requires you to micromanage nearly every unit by hand to make sure that it ends up where it's supposed to get to. Units themselves too are badly balanced. Chariots are nearly always the best choice for an early game, until siege weapons that is, infantry sucks from day one, and many games can be predicted to be won or lost just by comparing the number of these stronger units between the players. And finally, and probably worst of all, unit limit. Artificially created limit of 50 that's supposed to be enough to hold them all, villages responsible for keeping your nation afloat, scouts, priests, and armies on top of that is just stupid. These are not game-breaking problems in any way, but definitely impact the playability and fun factor in a considerable manner. Would I recommend trying Age of Empires out anyway? Hell yeah! There was hardly any better and more user-friendly towards non-RTS players game in 1997. Close Combat: A Bridge Too Far, aka Close Combat 2, is a follow-up to year prior's first outing, also a real-time historical strategy wargame, and a game that has possibly the most accurate title out of most that have ever came out, because bridges were life and death in it, quite literally too. Getting your units and especially tanks through some of the bridges before they're destroyed could save otherwise on the brink of a catastrophe mission. And opposed to that, having them eradicated before you manage to pass could often mean a guaranteed failure. Even more so if you managed to secure all of them, especially on a map that had few feasible points of which you could operate from, could change the mission into a walk in a park. Perhaps a park filled with torn off limbs, bodies, puddles of blood and post-impact craters of various size, but a park nonetheless. Some may think of the bridge mechanic as a mistake. I believe it to be an upgrade to the tactical side of gameplay. In fact, everything that the first game did, second did a bit better. The graphics were stunning, more detailed and smoother animated, the missions, while this time set during the Operation Market Garden, and playable from both points of view, were more thought out, more fun and definitely more challenging and varied. The AI is even better and more realistic, with each soldier simulated as a real person that's capable of panicking as much as raising to the challenge depending on the situation on the battlefield and orders that you issue. The sound design is excellent, and all the screams of the dying soldiers, clackety-clacks of heavy vehicles, shots and explosions are as realistic as I could imagine them to be. A Bridge Too Far was just a better game, a definite step up from the original. That said, it's not without its faults. They're not huge, but a bit annoying nonetheless. So, first of all, there are still no artilleries in the game. It's perhaps not world-shattering issue, but given that they were used during conflict and there's seemingly no technical reason for them not to be included, it feels disappointing. And secondly, while morale AI is still stellar, pathfinding is same as in most RTSs of the time, so rather trash. I'm not a fan of the genre and never played RTSs a lot, but this one's not that bad. And I'm sure fans of the gameplay loop or history-style tactic titles would love their time spent in Close Combat 2. Building on the success of the first title, Gremlin Interactive released Actua Soccer 2, their second game in the series and the only real competitor to FIFA Soccer on PC. Unlike FIFA, however, Actua Soccer did not aim to be full-fledged simulation, but rather a fun arcade footy. So, it's fast-paced, heavily focusing on ground play, and in the same time featuring 64 top international teams, 24 real-life stadiums, motion capture provided by Michael Owen, and weather conditions influencing gameplay not only visually, but also in a noticeable way in control during matches. Commentary is provided by Barry Davis and Trevor Brooking, and arguably it's the best out of all three mainstream Actua Soccer games. The graphics and sounds are pretty nice for 1997, even if not groundbreaking, and the arcade-centric gameplay is enjoyable too. That said, it's the arcade feeling that's also the biggest flaw, at least in the eyes of many players that craved a simulation to compete with FIFA, because the pace at which Actua 2 ran was impossible to achieve in real life. You could be at both goals in a span of few seconds, and it was nothing unusual. The fact that you could not play club teams and only international sides was another of the gripes. Perhaps not as important, but it was. In the end, while there was nothing wrong with Actua Soccer 2 in reality, if you kept in mind what it was, that is, it never gained the popularity of its competitor, and after releasing another 2 follow-ups a year later, it ceased to exist. First time that I ever played Grand Theft Auto, it wasn't even a full game, but a limited time demo. I can't tell you how long it was, as I don't remember, but I feel that it was something like 30 minutes or so. Not very long though. But I must have played it at least 100 times. I've put so much time in it, it's ridiculous. I mean, most full games that came out back then never got as much attention from me as this demo did. And that was the GTA phenomenon. I got the full version a little while later, first as a copy of a questionable legality without any FMV movies, and generally speaking lacking the GTA feeling, and a month or so later a full genuine boxed release. Now, that was a game to sink hundreds of hours in easily. I mean, sure, story could probably be completed in around 15 hours, but former GTA games, same as the current ones, were not only about the story that the developers prepared, but also about experiences you could craft for yourself while playing, and just messing around with the game world. And yeah, that's what I did mainly. And you most likely too. Anyway, I don't think that's possible, but on an odd chance that some of you might have been living under the rock these last few decades, let me tell you what it actually is. Grand Theft Auto is a top-down, always-scrolling arcade game in which you take a role of a small-time criminal trying to make it big in the gang world and rise through the mobster ranks. The game takes place in a tri-city area of Liberty City based on New York, San Andreas based on San Francisco, and Vice City based on Miami. And they're divided into 6 parts that all need to be unlocked while playing. Each unlock requires a certain score to be reached. By doing so also gives you time to familiarize yourself with the part of the city that you currently have access to. Which may seem like a weird choice, but having to know the city by heart not only helps with avoiding police chases, but also teaches you of locations of all the important utilities, shortcuts, weapon pickup spots and such, which in the heat of the moment later on may and will save your life. Main missions are picked up by answering phones, while secondary side quests are usually hidden in cars parked in unusual locations. Main missions are your typical scene in hundreds of movies to date gang/mob tasks of anything from ditching a hot car for trashing, through robberies, bank jobs, all the way to assassinations, and many other in between. Basically, whatever you've seen in the movie is most likely one way or another depicted somehow in the game. Completing missions not only raise your score, but also your score multiplier, so having successfully done few in a row can be worth astronomical points. Side missions are usually timed events of various kinds, often centered around killing certain number or type of people in a limited time. All those criminal activities, however, raise the police suspicion of you, and eventually you'll get your first star. I mean, first wanted level, which represents how much of an interest you are to the boys in blue. 1 star usually means a single, maybe 2 squad cars going after you, but if the meter's all the way to the full, a whole police force will be actively chasing you. They'll shoot to kill, they'll set up roadblocks, they will hunt you till their dying breaths. Literally, as knowing you, you'll be disposing of them in a wholesale manner, leaving a trail of death and orphans behind. The only way to get rid of the wanted level, other than the occasional bonus pickup, is to find and go to respray shop, where you'll get a new license plate and forever disappear from the cops' radar. By forever I mean until your next crime, so more or less 40-45 seconds. And this is where the familiarity with the city I spoke about earlier comes in handy, in knowing where to race off, where to disappear. Interestingly enough, unlike modern GTA games, in first you did not have an unlimited number of lives, and dying too many times could actually end your game. That will take a while though, and a single death usually results in losing all of the weapons, armor and your score multiplier being lowered on top of that too. There are crates scattered around the cities and they can contain weapons from pistols all the way to the rocket launchers, armor, extra lives, police bribes that remove your current wanted level and get out of jail free cards that cause you to lose nothing when killed or busted. Sounds hella cool, right? It was. It is to this day actually. And while the missions are fun and all, it's the scenarios that you would organically create for yourself just messing around the city in dozens of available and differently handling cars that made GTA such a special little bag of fun. I don't believe that you've never played it, it's just impossible. But if I'm wrong, then this is the time when you pause the video and go and seek it out to play it. It's definitely worth it. G-Police is a third/first-person vehicular sci-fi futuristic shooter that at the time of its release was spectacular looking. Truth be told, it doesn't look that bad today either. It's perhaps not a show-off anymore, but it's not as bad as many of the early 3D games are. Story-wise, Earth's governments fell years ago, they were unsuccessful in managing the country's resources, military, anything really, and if that wasn't enough, a violent interstellar resource war left us strained not only for peace, but also very basic resources too. So the giant megacorporations, seeing the state of things, took over and led humanity into colonization of space. And since there are no governments leading the colonies anymore, no military to speak of either, a new form of law protectors was created, the so-called G-Police. Which I shit you not, keep in mind what I said up to this point, is actually short for government police. And even better, despite the name, it's an independent agency keeping order in the colonies. Now where is logic in that? Tell me. Maybe you know, I don't. Whatever. You play as Jeff Slater. Slater, see you later, who's a former military pilot undercover at the G-Police on Callisto, one of Earth's colonies. You're there to serve and protect officially, but in reality mainly to find the truth behind your sister's untimely death. It's a pretty deep, even if short story for a shooter, but it doesn't hurt that it's there and provides an incentive to carry on and complete the game, so let's leave it as it is. You're piloting a futuristic helicopter gunship, fighting against numerous air and ground targets in series of different missions, slowly uncovering a sinister corporate plot, step by step, or kill by kill really, getting closer to the mystery of your late sister's passing. There's 36 missions in the game, and they can vary in the objectives quite considerably and can be anything from simple escorts through following of suspects to destruction of all enemy vehicles and installations, and anything in between. To succeed in these, you have a wide selection of different weapons. Only basic ones, so a chain gun and unguided rockets, are available at start, but with time you'll get access to plasma cannon, thermal guns and bombs capable even of destroying skyscrapers among others. G-Police's presentation deserves another mention here too, as not only it looks incredible, portraying very cyberpunkish looking, modern, dark cities of the future, but also accompanying sound design is excellent and fitting. The animations that you get to experience between the missions are stellar too. Pre-rendered in high detail and very atmospheric, binding all of the game's features into one coherent package. That's as good looking as it is fun. If you've never played it, it's definitely worth a try. With a name like Gigawatt Studios, which could have only been established by a Giga chat, I cannot fathom any other possibility here, my expectations for their Men in Black the game were naturally quite high, probably a bit too high even. The game loosely adapts 1997's movie into a 3D third-person action-adventure that plays very similarly to everyone's favorite Resident Evil games. So, all the characters and enemies are rendered in real time in full 3D, while the environments are pre-rendered and the camera perspective is moving between fixed viewpoints on these backgrounds. Now, I've been pretty vocal about how much I love static pre-rendered backgrounds and jumping viewpoint in games, so I'm not gonna tell you if the game's worth playing or not, and I will let you make your own mind about it. Cause regardless if it's here or in Resident Evil titles, it's definitely not my cup of tea. And if I'm to be honest, Alone in the Dark were probably the only games that I was sorta capable of ignoring it, and even then only to a degree. Never mind that though, as I'm drifting off the subject again. So, let's get back to Men in Black. The game starts very similarly to the movie. You play as NYPD police officer James Edwards, yep, very same Will Smith portrait, and you're investigating a robbery in an apartment building. There, you find an alien and near immediately are recruited into Men in Black, where along with agents K and L, you'll be protecting Earth from various kinds of alien menace, while keeping the public in the dark. Most missions start in MIB headquarters, where you're briefed on your next mission and can arm yourself for it. Armament is a mixture of realistic and lore-friendly guns, including the cult classic, as seen in the first MIB movie, Noisy Cricket. After the initial mission, you can always choose as which of the agents you'd like to play, J, K or L, each of them handling a little different in terms of how they fight and having access to unique dialogues, but other than that, they're largely just a stylistic choice. The three main missions that you will have to partake in are funny enough not located anywhere in or around NYC and will take you all around the globe, to the Arctic, Amazon and a nondescript remote island in the middle of the ocean. Unlike Resident Evil, Men in Black is not a horror, and most missions comprise of exploration, combat with various aliens and some light environmental puzzle solving, usually centered around opening doors with keycards, operating a computer here and there, and finding a way to pass obstacles. Similarly to RE though, the ammunition is both finite and limited, and should be conserved and picked up whenever possible. While I cannot recommend Men in Black because I hate the static cameras and pre-rendered background game design with a passion comparable to thousands of volcanoes exploding all at once and covering the world in scorching lava, I cannot ignore over 200 screens that the game is built out of. Nicely animated, fun and lore-friendly cutscenes, very decently feeling tie-in to the movie, and most importantly, a rather decent mix of shooting and adventuring, with neither taking the definite forefront of gameplay, making it feel rather well balanced. In the end, MIB is a bit too difficult for me to enjoy, and its design ideas are something I cannot get behind. But whether you should play it or not is something you should figure out all by yourself. Myth the Fallen Lords is a full 3D real-time fantasy strategy tactics game, and it was one of the first few, other than Diablo, that I remember there being huge hype for before it released. And believe it or not, it actually delivered. Well, I only played it a little, as it's a real-time strategy and I'm not big on them, but I remember it being not only a gigantic success, but also very, very popular in my friend circle. Despite it being me, my dog, my imaginary friend Jesus, and one dude with a funky-looking dead tooth. The game tells a story of a conflict between good and bad, light and dark, the Nine versus Balor, ruler of the evil titular Fallen Lords. The Nine are powerful sorcerers standing on the side of good, so that we're clear. Myth starts at the very interesting point of conflict in the 17th year of war, 50 years since evil Balor's rise, with forces of light on the brink of defeat. Most of the land is already in Balor's iron grip under his rule, and only one major city and a few smaller towns remain free. The plot follows the activities of the so-called Legion, an elite unit in the Army of Light, as they, obviously under your control, are attempting to turn the tide of the conflict and defeat Balor. It's a pretty cool setup if you ask me, and I'd like to see more games putting as much attention to the background and lore. I mean, there's nothing wrong with the devil kidnapped your girlfriend and you have to travel through 5 kingdoms to save her, but this just feels more fleshed out than that. Unlike majority of other RTSs of the time, Myth completely omits resource management and base building, focusing on real-time tactics alone, which may have been an issue for some of the genre traditionalists, but given how much attention was put to it, it made Myth a very deep game and an instant classic. So, for each battle you are giving a set of certain different units, each with their own strengths and weaknesses, and you have to use their skills best to complete the challenges ahead. And you better do it well, cause units neither regenerate health, nor you can purchase or build new ones. What you get is what you have and need to make do with. I mean, in some missions you may get reinforcements in predetermined scripted points, but I wouldn't count on them. It's best to prepare for the worst and then be pleasantly surprised, rather than count on them showing up and fall defeated cause you were waiting for something that was never going to happen. The terrain also plays a huge role in any and all encounters, and having high ground advantage for your units, especially ranged ones, is not only advisable, but can pretty much make or break your game. The units you'll control are within a standard fare for the fantasy setting, with archers, infantry, cavalry and anything in between in various races, from human to dwarves, against the hordes of evil magical creatures and the undead. In single player only light side can be controlled in the campaign, in multiplayer both are available. At the time of its release, presentation-wise, Myth had no competition on the market. No other RTS looked or sounded as good, so it was bound to succeed. And it did. And in no small part thanks to its success, Bungie, the developer, is as big and well known today as it is. Despite being arguably the second best game in the SSI's 5-star series, directly after Amazing Fantasy General, before the engine was upgraded for Panzer General 2, Pacific General never became as popular and well known as the original was. Which is disappointing, as theoretically it was the most balanced game out of them all. Pacific General covers land and naval combat during World War II in the Pacific Theater of Operations and depicts conflict between US and Japanese forces. And you can take control of both, in either single scenarios or a full campaign. These cover both historical and hypothetical scenarios, so invasions of China and Burma, attack on Pearl Harbor, and even invasions of Japanese mainland and San Francisco. So true or not, you're not gonna get bored with this tactical turn-based strategy wargame. The addition of hundreds of naval units brought some changes to the typical for the General series formula. For one, some larger units can now occupy more than one hex, so when one of the hexes is supposed to be destroyed and the other is still intact, it counts as a critical hit to the unit. Aircraft can protect ships from air attacks in CAP mode, submarines can submerge for attacks, and aircraft carriers can be, so to speak, opened to reveal fighters ready for launching. So, with this outing, finally combined forces attacks are possible, with some units taking ground while others rule over the seas. The biggest change to the formula, however, was the ability to move units after combat, if they had any movement points remaining, that is. It may seem like a no-brainer today, but back then, in earlier games, attack ended particular unit's turn. So this allowed for many more, considerably more advanced strategic planning and attacks, especially against superior enemy units. Pacific General's presentation is not much different than that of other games in the series, and while it's easily readable and clean, it's nothing special really. It doesn't have to be though, as strategies don't need to be flashy. It's good enough if they're deep and fun, and Pacific General, fortunately, is both. The Curse of the Monkey Island released 5 long years after the previous one did, and it was a long-awaited, anticipated by many sequel, and also a point-and-click adventure game. This time, however, it's all in high-resolution SVGA, with cartoony graphics and tons of animated sequences. The game looks gorgeous, it's stunning. The animations and sound design are as good, and for the time it came out in, Curse was probably one of the best, if not the best looking game on the market. The interface went through a facelift again, removing all the verbs from the bottom of the screen once and for all and replacing them with a context-sensitive cursor, which in my opinion at least is a way better, more flexible and user-friendly gameplay choice. The inventory is brought on the screen with a right click, so if you're not in it, the whole screen area is for presenting the magnificent scene that you're in. Once again, the game is stunning. Story-wise, Guybrush Threepwood, finding himself as usual in the worst possible time and place, so drifting in a bumper car between the ships battling it out just outside of Plunder Island, is captured by the series' staple villain, evil pirate LeChuck. Guybrush somehow manages to escape, sink LeChuck's boat and steal a huge diamond ring in the process. Ring that he uses to propose to his all-time love Elaine, right on the Plunder Island's beach where he crashed. Now, this wouldn't be a LucasArts monkey game if something wouldn't go astray. And knowing Guybrush's luck, given his recent streak of wins, a colossal loss was long overdue. As it turns out, the ring was voodoo cursed. Who would have thought? And as soon as it landed on Elaine's slim finger, it turned her into a solid gold statue. And at this size, she was quite literally priceless, and not only metaphorically. So naturally, she, or a statue of her I should say, really was stolen by pirates. And with this dramatic event, your mission became more than obvious. To rescue Elaine, turn her back into human and live long and happy life after. No, scratch that. First, defeat LeChuck, because you know, he's a constant menace, then save Elaine and hopefully live long and happy life after. Until Guybrush's next crazy adventure, that is. First two Monkey Island games were amazing and must-plays, must-haves, must-sees, must everything really. This third is no different. So if you like adventure games, odd quirky sense of humor or just beautiful cartoon-like graphics, it's definitely one not to miss. Blood Omen Legacy of Kane originally came out in 1996 on PlayStation and instantly became a huge hit. Not as big as Resident Evil or Metal Gear Solid games were, more on a Spyro or Driver level. So very big, but not genre-defining game. In essence, it's a top-down horror-themed action-adventure with some very superficial role-playing elements, in which you play as the titular Kane, former nobleman, now a vampire. As the story goes, you've been slain by the bandits and then revived by the necromancer Mortanius. Since all you really wanted is revenge, now being a creature of the dark, you're stronger, faster and smarter than your killers and able to deal with them promptly. If the story would end here, we'd have no game however, so as it turns out, Mortanius, your quote-unquote savior, raised you for his own ends. Mortanius being a part of the so-called Circle of the Nine, a member of the Guardians of the Pillars of Nosgoth, same as the other current Guardians, is corrupted and turned evil, though his occupation may have given that away really. At the Pillars, Kane meets Ariel, one of the former Guardians, who informs him about the situation and explains that the only way to restore the balance and save Nosgoth is to find all the Guardians and kill them. It's obviously an abridged take on the story, but should explain enough about Kane's motivations to raise your interest in the game. As a vampire, you're in permanent blood hunger, and blood is also your HP, constantly trickling away like a dark horror life clock, so you must feed at regular intervals to stay alive. Interestingly enough, Kane is not your everyday vampire, as he can easily withstand sunlight, and on the flip side, he is harmed by water. So while he's able to move during daytime, he stinks, man. It's weird, is what I really mean by that. Unless all water in Nosgoth is holy water, then yeah, it kinda makes at least a partial sense. Look at me doing it again and solving another mystery for the ages. I gotta get myself something for that. Anyway, other than all that, along his adventure, Kane will obtain some cursed abilities and spells, such as transformation into a bat, wolf or a mist cloud. So yeah, he's definitely not your everyday vampire, more like a weird vampire, werewolf, demented magician hybrid. Now, naturally, to satisfy his hunger, Kane will have to kill and then consume the blood of his victims, which would be an issue, but the game is combat focused, so the bodies are aplenty and with steady supply of hot plasma to slurp on, Kane is just fine. Our protagonist will also get to acquire, equip and use various pieces of armor and weapons, so not to rely on his supernatural abilities only. Legacy of Kane is an action-adventure that mainly revolves around combat, with story and dialogues, while being arguably the best part of it, relegated to the backseat. It's a pity, but changes nothing. The game is still an excellent example of a conceptually simple but very playable title that's a must-have for any and all fans of the genre and classics. International Rally Championship is Magnetic Fields' follow-up to previously successful Rally Championship and arguably the best game of the kind on PC for 1997. It's a rally simulation offering unparalleled realism, very easy pre-race car setup interface and 16 beautiful tracks set in various locations around the world. Granted, some of them may be a bit controversial as they're not really part of the actual World Rally Championship, but in the game, deserts of Egypt and rainforest of Brazil are a sight to behold and tracks to be conquered. There are a few game modes available, from arcade and trial through championship to simulation, which is just a full rally season, so the most fun and involving part of the game. If you add to all that 9 painstakingly modeled cars looking as they do in real life, at least as much as the technology at the time allowed for, built-in excellent track editor, dynamic surface and weather conditions and realistic behaving cars, you're gonna end up with an incredible simulation that all fans of racing should at least try out. Sounds and graphics are very good too. Perhaps not on the AAA level, but a solid AA easy, holding its own against most other simulations and championing its own subgenre of racers. Now, let's not kid ourselves, no game is perfect, and this one's no exception. But there is only one thing I believe that I could honestly complain about here, and its lack of the first person behind the dashboard perspective, especially that it was present in its earlier iteration of Rally Championship and even older network Curac Rally. It's annoying, sure, but not big enough issue to detract from playing or enjoying the game. Oh, and on a side note, if the name of the developer, so Magnetic Fields, rings a bell, it's good, cause they're the veterans of the genre that started years earlier on the Amigas with their incredible Lotus and Supercars series of games. Turok is a dinosaur-themed FPS. Yup, those of you who knew it are not surprised, and others are in for hell of a ride. Well, if they decide to give it a chance and play it, and they don't mind rather crude early shooters. It's also one of the most popular FPSs on Nintendo 64, perhaps only bested by GoldenEye. So it's gotta be good, right? Let's see. Turok is a mantle bestowed upon these who protect the barrier dividing our world and mystical lost land, where the dinosaurs and demonic creatures live. Only the best of the best can ever become Turok. It's an honor, but also a responsibility. Especially that the evil lord campaigner is on a quest to find and use the artifact known only as a Chronoscepter. An artifact known to be capable of destroying the barrier between the worlds. And as villain names go, this one somehow does not telegraph evil enough for me. Anyway, you play as the last Turok, Talset, a Native American, and you must find the pieces of the Chronoscepter before the campaigner does. Most of the game takes place in large open areas, untypically for the genre, which usually saw you exploring various complexes. And majority of the enemies will be the dinosaurs of various kinds and sizes, humans, occasional animals, robots, or even demons there too, but in a more limited number. And while there's 13 different weapons in the game to dispose of the evil, you start with a knife and bow only, which was always something I really liked about Turok. Cause however you look at it, it's not an advantageous start. While you'll be mainly fighting various enemies, there are some platforming and light puzzling elements in the game too, mainly centered around finding appropriate keys and activating portals. Other than the dinos, naturally, the most prominent feature of Turok is definitely the exploration, cause not only you need to search for the pieces of Chronoscepter, but all levels can be approached in numerous ways, offering various routes you can take through them, making for a very non-linear feeling experience, even if the game itself naturally progresses in a very linear manner. Most levels have end bosses, which usually guard the last key in the stage. They are obviously much stronger and will require learning their attack patterns to beat. Presentation-wise, for the time Turok looked really nice and soundtrack was also fitting, heavy on the drums and very atmospheric. Overall, in 1997, Turok was a treat, and most who saw it liked it. Sonic 3D Blast originated on Sega Genesis, another favorite console of mine, and despite the naming, it's not 3D whatsoever, but isometric. 3D was a hype word in the second part of the 90s, so it was plastered on anything that could be even remotely considered 3D adjacent, hence the name. Change of perspective, however, gave Sonic a new ability of walking left and right, and not only forwards and backwards. Can you imagine? Crazy. If we were able to walk left and right in real life, then... Oh wait. Never mind. Anyway, the change may not seem like a lot, and it's not, at least today, but for the series it was a first and something that would pave the way for future real 3D Sonic games. The change also had another effect: the game was much slower, not because the hardware requirements were astronomical, not the case whatsoever, but because the viewpoint was better suited to more methodical platformers rather than those crazy fast ones. Story-wise, Dr. Robotnik, Sonic's nemesis, is as usual after Chaos Emeralds and will stop at nothing to get them. This time, it seems, he turned all of the Sonic's friends Flickies, I know, silly name, into Badniks, his mechanical robotic henchmen. So it's up to Sonic, and by extension of that you at the keyboard, to destroy the Badniks, freeing Flickies encased within, and then lead them to the interdimensional ring so that they could escape. A lot to unpack here perhaps, but don't look for any deeper reason behind it all, it's just Sonic. The game is divided into 7 levels and will see you grabbing all 7 Chaos Emeralds before the final showdown with the Robotnik himself. Interestingly enough, in 3D Blast, time isn't as important as in aerial games, and you don't have to rush through the levels maniacally. Now, don't hate me for it, or do, your call, I can't really tell you how to feel, but I think I liked Sonic 3D Blast more than the regular side view ones. Cause what was a feature for others in them, meaning extremely fast pace of gameplay powered by entirely fictional blast processing, was also an annoyance to me. Regular Sonic, while a game I actually like, is way too fast for me to play for longer periods of time without taking breaks. Blade Runner is a point-and-click adventure game loosely based on the movie of the same title, which in itself was based on Philip K. Dick's novel Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep, which on a side note is an excellent read. The game takes place in a grim and dark future of low life and high tech, in a world where alive mixes with artificial and biomechanical, to the point that there are artificially created, nay, manufactured, humans called replicants were not something particularly unusual. And other than the way they were brought to life, there's not that much that they differ from us. They think, feel, they have emotions, and yet we deem them unworthy of having any rights, of being true free beings. You play as Ray McCoy, the titular Blade Runner, a police officer tasked with hunting down and bringing replicants to the grim, slimy and questionably righteous hands of future justice, if it can even be called that. During gameplay, our protagonist will eventually realize that there is no black and white justice and that the conscientious beings should be allowed to live freely. But it will take him a minute to get there. Most of Blade Runner is considerably different to what we're used to in majority of adventure games, meaning that there's much less focus on puzzling and most of the fun of gameplay comes from interrogations, police work including gathering of evidence, conducting of Voidkampf tests and investigations. Voidkampf test, if you're unfamiliar with the subject matter, is a test designed to differentiate between artificial and biological intelligence. Change of direction the game takes when it comes to adventuring is a very refreshing take on the genre, and if you like Tex Murphy or Police Quest games, Blade Runner, even if sci-fi themed, very different from them, will definitely be something down your alley. Especially that the game allows you to pull out and use your gun quite freely, because you know you're free to do it and face potential consequences. You have the choice. Mind you, it's not necessary, but possible, even mid-investigation. It adds a lot of atmosphere to the dark, ruthless future that the Blade Runner is set in. Other than that, there are a few action sequences in the game, they're not overly difficult, and if you're someone who doesn't like this, don't worry, they're rather rare. Not all, but many of the decisions and actions that you will take throughout the story will influence plot's eventual conclusion, leading you to one of 6 possible endings. And all that makes Blade Runner not only an excellent adventure title to immerse yourself in, but also highly replayable one. I loved Ignition when it came out. I played it to death alone and a lot with a buddy of mine in split screen too. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. Ignition is an action-packed top-down racer, and it's an unusual one at that. It feels like a mixture of regular 3D racing game with micro machines, and it rocks. The combinations shouldn't work because why would it? And it does so well. Everything about it is great. The tracks are excellent, unique, fun to race on, learn and conquer. Full of obstacles, jumps and different hazards. There are multi-level, serpent-filled masterpieces. So it's not unusual to be seeing your opponent way below you on an earlier stretch of the road if you're a few seconds ahead of him. The beauty of the track's design lies in those little details that are often overlooked when frantically racing, but also building blocks of this entire incredible game. Then there's something many may not give any attention to, so the camera, and it's perfect. It follows the action, never gets in the way, never puts you in a position when you don't see the part of the road you need to, or next corner. It's well baked in, is what I'm saying. Finally, there's 11 vehicles in the game, and I say vehicles and not racing cars intentionally, as there are a really mixed bunch of these. From Beetles and Jeeps through police squad cars all the way to the school buses. And each handles and behaves differently on the road, at speed, during jumps or drifting. Some are better for short, full of turns tracks, others are well suited for long straights, and then there are those that are somewhere between the two. But each have their own use cases and tracks that they work great on, so there's no single best car out of all of them. Aggressive and very dynamic gameplay coupled with frantically designed tracks and unique cars make Ignition a true gem of a game. If you've never played it, you're in a hell of a time. And if you have, you're just sitting there nodding, agreeing how much fun it can be. Also, only 4 tracks and cars are available at the start and the rest needs to be unlocked by winning races. So there's some sense of progression if you play alone too. Let me invite you for a short trip back in time. Let's break the laws of physics. Together, you and I. But not weeks, months or even years. Let's go back 2-3 minutes only, when we spoke about Ignition and when I said that I loved it when it came out. Why? Because I loved Motor Racer when it came out too. And while it may have induced a very similar feelings in me, it was a completely different kind of a cookie. So, Motor Racer is a third-person arcade motorcycle racing game. It features 8 tracks in total, 4 road-based and 4 on dirt, and they can all be played normally or in reverse, so technically they feel as if there was 16 of them. In fact, a 3-track add-on was released a little after the game dropped and added 1 extra of each tracks, so since they could be driven both ways, it actually felt like 20 in total. They are all quite varied and require a different racing style or strategy to beat them, which is good as it forces you to try different bikes out. Bikes that, while may differ in stats of speed, grip, steering and acceleration, are not straightforward better or worse, as some that may theoretically appear to be weaker may actually perform way better on specific designed for them tracks. Experimentation is the key here, and learning all vehicles and tracks is really helpful. There are 4 gameplay modes of practice, time attack, single race and championship circuit, and for once I will not explain the difference between them, cause it's quite obvious going by their names only. The most important thing about Motor Racer, however, and something that made millions fall in love with it, is a sensation of speed. It's just unparalleled. When you're on a superbike going on that long stretch of the road with background changing into a blur of colors, there is just nothing like it. Or at least there was nothing like it back then in 1997. Motor Racer is a game that surprised me on its release cause being mainly a role-playing and strategy gamer that occasionally dabbled in other genres, a motorbike title was not something I would be actively seeking. And yet, it took me by surprise and got me addicted for a good couple of weeks. Earth 2140 is a Polish post-apocalyptic themed futuristic real-time strategy, and a pretty decent RTS at that if you like those, that is. I don't, but I'll try to stay as objective as I'll manage to. So, in the year 2140, Earth is in ruin. On a side note, going by what's currently happening in the world, I deem it to be a very plausible future. It was partly caused by numerous environmental catastrophes, partly because of the countless wars we've waged over the years. The reason at this point is really irrelevant. The point is, Earth is a shadow, a shell of its former self, and the remaining humans gathered up, joined into two major factions and moved underground, where it was still safe to live. So there's the United Civilized States and Eurasian Dynasty, both fighting for whatever the scraps of remaining usable land there still are. There are two campaigns, one for each side, and you'll be pleasantly surprised with variety of missions that they can offer. Because while the general formula of mining resources, erecting structures, then building units and sending them to battle still apply here, some missions have very creative and, dare I say it, fun objectives. There's over 30 of these missions, each side has around 10 types of buildings and 30 kinds of units, and they're all different and unique to their factions. Oh, and some of the units are huge mechs, which are always fun to see in action, regardless of the type and genre of the game in question. Now, am I right or am I right? What Earth 2140 was best known for, however, other than the graphics, which I'll get to in a moment, is the difficulty, which is astronomical. I mean, not only because the game is rather fast and doesn't wait for sleepy or neurotic gamers to catch up, but also because of AI being pretty smart. They will often attack from few flanks at once or try to pull you into a trap. It's not unusual to be as pleasantly surprised by their tactical choice as terrified of how well they're pulling it off. Presentation-wise, Earth 2140 is, or was, fantastic. The units are clearly distinguishable, uniquely looking and behaving, all very nicely and smoothly animated, whether they're attacking or moving. The shots and explosions are well telegraphed too, and it's not uncommon to have parts of the screen entirely covered in fire and smoke during some of those larger combat encounters. Sounds are as good, with all weapons and units having their own high-quality clickety-clackety sounds and explosions sounding appropriately bassy. If you like RTSs, this one's definitely not to skip. Dark Earth is a third-person action-adventure survival game with some light puzzle-solving elements, and it utilizes the Spiced by Me viewpoint, namely static pre-rendered backgrounds with pre-assigned camera locations that switch as you move around the area. I find this solution to be chaotic and distracting, and in the same time I understand the choice. It allowed the devs to use high-quality looks-wise and yet very low in terms of hardware requirements backgrounds, with only immediate characters and objects on these backgrounds rendered in real time. So yeah, I get the reason behind it, I just don't like it. Never mind. Dark Earth takes place in the far-off future, in the post-apocalyptic remnants of Earth. The planet is mostly covered in darkness that brings in sickness and death, possibly despair, but I've not checked that. And there are only few places left with access to natural sunlight, one of them City of Starlight, the so-called Citadel of Light, from which you, playing as an individual going by the name of Arkan, hail. Given the gloominess of the world in the future and the death lurking from the dark, Sun is worshipped as God and no one remembers anything about the gods of the past. Perhaps for the best, as they'd be of no help on Dark Earth. So, one of those days, when Arkan is protecting a Sun priestess, they are attacked by an assassin who throws a vial of darkness at Arkan. And that thing is like a death sentence. So, our diseased protagonist sets off into the heart of the dark to wander it in search for the cure and to bring back light and order to the world, if possible. The game gives you a selection of few firearms, all of them naturally as it's appropriate for the genre with a very limited supply of ammo, and weapons susceptible to breakdowns. These naturally can be repaired, but it adds to the scary atmosphere of having to survive in a very unfriendly and potentially deadly environment while being poisoned and slowly being eaten bit by bit by the flowing in your veins corruption from within, fighting not to turn into something else, something unhuman. Every now and then you'll get to make an important story decision that may influence the pace at which the transformation occurs, so keep that in mind when it happens. Dark Earth is definitely worth a look if you're not me and enjoyed Resident Evil. Premier Manager 98 is basically Premier Manager 97, but with updated international and nationwide team squads data for all 92 included teams. Everything else, so league database, 3D match engine and a whole set of features, remains unchanged. The game features two modes, a Manager and Pro Manager, first allowing you to start the game with any team, while the other, much more difficult but also way more fun, has you starting in the conference and slowly building your career up to the higher leagues. It's what you'd call a full football management experience. Other than the game mode, there are also 4 types of control, limiting or expanding your possibilities when it comes to leading your chosen team. And you can pick Trainer, to only deal with player tactics and squad selection, accountant to control transfers, contracts, staff finance board and stadium expansions, manager, which is combination of the earlier two short of contract details, and finally total, which, as you've no doubt guessed already, allows you to take full control of all aspects of your chosen team. While there are numerous international sites available, there's only an English league in the game, which when compared to other management games of the time may seem like a very limiting choice. They seem to be very accurately represented though, so playing the game does not radiate the feeling of missing something if you're someone who'd pick an English league in the competing titles anyway. Up to 20 players can play on a single system in Manager mode and 8 in Pro Manager. So if you're in a group of friends and all of you like managers, it can be a fun evening. Or better yet, series of. The 3D match engine, while not very flashy or sophisticated, is expansive enough to provide a variety of excitement during matches for a little while. But, as it was quite common with those managers that provided graphical representation of matches, the number of these on-pitch actions is limited in number, and after a day or two of playing, you'll be quite familiar with all the plays included. Premier Manager 98 is fun and reasonably deep, though not as fun as, let's say, Ultimate Soccer Manager 98 was, or not as comprehensive and overflowing with stats as Championship Manager. It sits somewhere between them, but not close enough to either, and seemingly unable to pick whichever of the two it would like to be more similar to. And the reason, I think, may be that the game released on PlayStation 2, and that the devs wanted to offer a similar set of features on both machines, compromising to the lowest common denominator. I'm not saying that there's anything wrong with Premier Manager, I just can't escape the feeling that the game was made with an intention of it being a console release and then to be ported to PC. I may be wrong though, feel free to correct me if you know better. Oh, what a game Capitalism Plus was. And is, to this day actually. At the time, it was the most comprehensive and realistic business simulation. You've got your company and you can do whatever you like with it. You can become a manufacturer in one of the many industries or a retailer with shops everywhere, selling either specialized or mixed goods and items of any kind. Or even a stock market giant, buying low and selling high, living off the profits and never actually building or manufacturing anything. But you know what's best about Capitalism Plus? You don't have to pick and choose, and you can do it all if you'd like to. In fact, you can have as small and simple company as possible, cornering a very small niche of the market in a tiny plant manufacturing small components for some bigger products that others make, or you can manufacture all the parts in one plant, then assemble them in various other products in other locations, and finally sell them in a chain of your brand stores. So, you can go as big as you manage to become too. It's a true American dream simulator where what you do with what you're given will result with what you deserve. And everyone, anyone who has an idea, can spot an opportunity to exploit it, can become a millionaire. Or billionaire even. I freaking loved Capitalism Plus. And spent hours figuring out various different scenarios, business ideas and trying to optimize my chains to milk the proverbial corporation cow of all the money she could provide and more. It's amazing. And if any of what I said sounds remotely interesting to you, you should definitely give it a go as it's fantastic. The Enhanced Plus version of Capitalism is your basic game really, but with a whole slew of new features. Most important ones being the enhanced graphics, increased number of products to over 80 now, mainly from the high-tech sector, a set of new various random events like earthquakes or revolutions, real-world maps of different regions in USA, Europe and Asia, addition of a built-in map and scenario editor, pre-made historical and futuristic scenarios, and multiplayer using play-by-email solution, which is a thing that sadly died with rapid speed growth of online connections. I might have not played Capitalism this way, but I always liked it in the Civilization. Anyway, to summarize, Capitalism Plus is the same brilliant and tough as a cookie game, made even better and even more demanding. If you like the original, this is the natural progression of it and you'll love it. If you didn't, then it's nothing new really, so it's highly unlikely that it'll make you change your mind. Dark Reign: The Future of War is a very Zerg swarmy in its design real-time strategy. And what do I mean by that, you may wonder? Oh, you don't? Very well then, if you know then you know, whatever. Nah, kidding. What I meant is that it's a very, very fast game. A callback to RTSs of yore, focusing more on rushing production of units and then overwhelming enemies with them, rather than slow and methodic build-up of industrial structures, followed by equally slow progress of units production. Dark Reign placed all its bets on teaching you how to best utilize units, so strong or weak, if you didn't know how to use them, you wouldn't win. This, along with the pace at which the game ran, made it a bit controversial as compared to the classics or its own biggest competitor in the form of Total Annihilation. Interestingly enough, Dark Reign pioneered line-of-sight mechanics, which was made to complement the genre standard fog of war. Because for instance, you could have an artillery that very often was capable of shooting from where they were stationed to even up to half of the map length range, making them incredibly deadly. But to work they needed a line of sight. So you'd have to use one set of units to provide it, uncovering a terrain for potential attack, before the artillery could launch a rain of projectiles at that particular spot, annihilating everything there. It made things more intricate and demanding on the player than other games did, but also so fun when you could pull it off. Terrain height also played a very important role in Dark Reign, as units high up had a very noticeable and realistic advantage over those below them. The ability to set up patrol waypoints or even send units to search and destroy, effectively allowing them to seek out enemies on their own and engage in combat as they pleased, was also a novelty not seen anywhere else at the time. And it was neither an afterthought nor late addition, the mechanic was implemented quite smartly. Cause if the enemy was previously spotted anywhere within your view range, they would start their search from that point and not a random spot on the map. Dark Reign's sound and visual presentation is rather nice, with CD quality soundtrack, meaty sounding shots and explosions, and high resolution graphics. Sure, some vehicles and structures look rather odd, alien even, but that's just a design choice and doesn't get in the way of playing. Additionally, built-in map editor is very easy and ergonomic to use and allows for creation of new and interesting scenarios. In the end, if you like RTSs, I'm sure I don't have to convince you to check Dark Reign out. And I wouldn't anyway, cause I don't. I find them too fast and too chaotic, Dark Reign especially. So yeah. Dungeon Keeper is an oddity. It's part real-time strategy, part settlement management, part tower defense minus the towers, and finally part first-person combat game. And when these parts combine, I am Captain Planet. Oh, my bad, wrong video. Obviously I meant that with all this combined, what we're left with is an amazingly addictive and very fun game that's a pleasure to play today as much as it originally was. You have to construct and manage dungeon and then recruit and train minions to defend it. You mine for gold and gems, set traps, build rooms, each with its unique purpose and use case, and cast spells. I know that the last two sentences were a lot to process, but Dungeon Keeper is all that and more. Your main task is to defend your dungeon hard, cause when that falls, you lose. And you protect it from heroes that keep invading your dungeon, fighting your creatures, hunting for treasures, and ultimately trying to get to that still beating dungeon hard. The heroes are not boring knights only either, and can be among others giants, wizards, or even samurais, because game logic. And also, why the hell not? As you progress through the game and unlock new rooms and creatures, you'll keep finding new ways to experience, enjoy and progress within the world of Dungeon Keeper and its 20 regions to conquer. Each of the creatures you build the room for is different both in stats and their behavior, and some of them are actually natural enemies to one another, so you should not build rooms willy-nilly just wherever it suits you, but plan ahead. Spiders and flies, for instance, are natural enemies, so keeping them close will never yield good results. At least not for the flies. Dungeon Keeper is amazing, it may not look like anything special in this short preview video, but believe me, that it's so good that not many games of 1997 could compare to it in terms of playability. Especially that up to 4 Dungeon Masters could play together via modem or LAN. It's a gem. FIFA Road to World Cup 98 started off like a rocket, launching into the stratosphere with Song 2 by Blur just pushing you to play it. And so I did. I played it like a maniac. Funny thing, I don't like sports games at all. Well, maybe other than the multi-event compilations, bowling, snooker, pool, Texas Hold'em or ski jumping. And yet, I did. I wasted so much time on that FIFA with 2 buddies of mine over one summer, day in, day out. We drank beer with raspberry cordial and played FIFA. Don't judge, I really can't tell you for the life of me now what that cordial was there for, but it was. Anyway, as the title suggests, you're not playing the World Cup only in this one, but can also experience qualifications for it too, all using varying systems implemented in different parts of the world. And it's hella fun, if you're into the sport that is. Or beers, watered down with syrupy juices. That works too. But the fact that major focus was put into tying in the game into the grand sporting event doesn't mean that the league play suffered in any way. There's solid 11 leagues available to play in and 189 league clubs to pick between, each with their respective crowd chants and ambient sounds. Other than all that, FIFA 98 feels much faster than the previous 3 installments and AI behaves more natural on the pitch, resulting in more realistic feeling gameplay. Most well-known players have their distinctive looks represented as well, as much as the technology allowed for that at least. And there are 16 unique stadiums included in the game. While in the recent years the commentary may have been seriously expanded, I always had a soft spot for 98's John Motson and Andy Gray. Probably because I still used to play FIFA back then and only have vague knowledge of how it looks like now. In the end, if you like classic sports games, especially football, this one's hands down the best for the year it came out in. I've mentioned it numerous times on the channel and it's no news for those who've been watching my videos for a while, but Heroes of Might and Magic 2 is my most favorite outing in the whole series. If you somehow managed to never hear about the game, which is hard to believe and I, sir, deem you a liar, you can watch me explain what the base game is all about in detail the best way I can, so chaotically, in one of my former videos. The link will be visible in the top right if you're watching this on PC and in the video description if you're on anything else. So, if Heroes 2 is new to you, go there first and then come back here. But if you're familiar with it, stay here and let's carry on. Let's plow through this ginormous add-on together. The Price of Loyalty is the first and only expansion to Heroes 2, but just because there were no others, it doesn't mean that it's not a good one. In fact, it nearly doubles the amount of content of the base game. It features 4 new campaigns, 2 short ones 3-4 maps strong, and 2 longer, built out of 8 maps each. And while it may seem like this may be of similar length to those in base game, they're played on bigger maps and are more demanding, so should take much longer to complete. They also feature optional completion paths, adding to the replayability a lot. But let's not kid ourselves, while campaigns are fun and all, most of us played Heroes either with, against friends, or on random maps, having completed campaigns in a heartbeat on the week of game's release. The novelties don't end with campaigns naturally. Heroes 2 also introduced new locations, new artifacts and monsters too. All this made the game much more fun and exponentially extended its longevity. Especially worth mentioning out of the on-map locations were the barriers. That required you to find password first, and when opened, they did both. Open new areas for you to explore and conquer, and doors for the enemies to raid your lands. While there were few creature dwellings added, the most interesting and useful was the Barrow Mount, which allowed recruiting of ghosts, one of the best units in the entire game. They were far from being the strongest, the fastest or most resistant. In fact, they sat somewhere in the middle stat-wise, but had an uncanny ability to add their unit number by defeating enemies. So they were best utilized against large groups of easy enemies so that they could feed on them, multiplying their numbers, promptly increasing their importance on the battlefield with each attack. Elementals could be recruited too, but were considerably less impactful. Hat of the Magi is also worth mentioning among new additions, as it expands your map view. New artifacts in large part contain both considerable bonuses and penalties, all at once, making for a very strategic choice, having to decide if a particular change you were after was worth the coming with it punishment. And finally, an item set that created a new super powerful artifact when all 3 base ones were picked up. Some towns got extra building or some small modifications to have some of these that they already had worked, and these were less immediately noticeable but fun nonetheless changes. And finally, the expansion came with incredibly easy to use and yet very robust updated map editor that allowed for use of all the assets available in the game and scripting. And all that resulted with my most favorite ever custom Heroes 2 map, Gyros 2. If you've played it, you know why. If you didn't, let me know, I'm sure I can help you get your pose on it. I love Heroes of Might and Magic 2, and the Price of Loyalty made it an even better, bigger and more playable title. A masterpiece in my eyes. Sure, objectively speaking Heroes 3 was better, but to me, nothing could compare to the second. When our protagonist Abe overhears that his race of Mudcons, that's been enslaved by the evil Glucons to work in their huge corporations for a while, is actually a delicacy, a source of incredibly delicious and popular meat for the Glucons, he decides to run away and save as many of his brethren as possible, whatever means necessary. Oddworld: Abe's Odyssey is an action puzzle platformer that was very popular, especially on Sony PlayStation, for having beautiful presentation, interesting gameplay mechanic and a very well thought out mixture of puzzling and quick-time arcade elements. It's also a game I never liked, regardless of how many times I tried making myself get into it, I always failed. It's just not for me, and I can't tell why. Perhaps because it's so unforgiving, it feels like a Souls-like game, which is another genre I despise for being more frustrating than rewarding, or perhaps something else. I will never know, as I will never try it out again. But generally speaking, I'm in a very, very tiny vocal minority. Most critics and gamers of the time loved it, found it enchanting and challenging just enough to keep them entertained, but not enough to cause anger and annoyance. So, if you're not an avid hater of Souls games, same as I am, and enjoy platformers, perhaps Oddworld is something you might find yourself liking, which I wish upon you as it really gets no love from me. Panzer General 2 is the successor to the most well-known and popular entry in the original SSI's General series and tackles the very same conflict original did. Once again, you can take part in various scenarios for both sides, Allied and Axis, and even try your luck in a fictional what-if scenario, seeing invasion of the United States, which as improbable as it sounds, it's also interesting thing to see play out. Other than that, many smaller and bigger changes on the mechanical side of the game have been made, making for a more realistic and satisfying simulation. Each hex now represents roughly 2 square kilometers of terrain, some units can find a hit at the distance, planes don't have to refuel as often, and units can be battalion regiment sizes. The map graphics are considerably improved too, but at a cost of scenario editor not allowing for modification of maps anymore. The AI is stronger, faster and more crafty than ever before, looking to hit you smart and not strong only. Germans, Russians, English and Americans all have their separate campaigns, but they do not start at a historically accurate point of German invasion into Poland, but earlier during civil war in Spain. There are 3 different kinds of victories in Panzer General 2, depending on how well you did in the mission. So, brilliant, normal and tactical victory. With having to win in a brilliant one, you get a small chance to gain access to a prototype special unit that's otherwise impossible to get in the game. Each of the available units in the series tradition is described by series of stats which correspond directly to their effectiveness in combat, and all of them, as per usual, can level up. This time, however, at each level up, there's a small chance that the commander will appear and grant the unit 2 special abilities, and these make them considerably more useful or deadly, or both. Overall, Panzer General 2 is an upgraded and polished version of the original and a true treat to all fans of the genre. I remember first seeing original Rampage in the arcades. I was still in the primary school, I think, and it looked hella fun. I had a general grasp on what it was about, but haven't had a chance to play it, as the cabinet was constantly busy, so I played other, usually brawler or fighting games instead. My first ever real experience with it was on Commodore 64. Now, as much as it was an amazing system and had 2 different versions of the game, both good and unique in their own right, they were a far cry from the arcade classic. I played it on the Amiga later and eventually MS-DOS too, and while these were better, especially the Amiga port, they too were not up to the standard I hoped for. All fun games, let me make that clear, but neither good enough to warrant me trying to complete them. Enter Rampage World Tour. Arguably the very best version of the game, definitely presentation-wise, offering same classic multiplayer gameplay loop and modern graphics. Unlike the original though, I actually did manage to play this one outside of classic systems, arcade emulators or compilations, and it seems that I liked it, but still not to the point of having ever completed. And it's when it became painfully obvious that it's a title that was not made to play alone, just you and the screen. No, this way it was an average game at best, and good for maybe an hour or so, no more though. But with someone else, Rampage is a blast. Together you can do both. Focus on a total destruction and annihilation of human armies and city blocks, and competition for points. In that kind of a setting, I can easily manage attempting a full run. Today, sadly, I have no one I could convince to play it for as long, so it's not happening ever, but perhaps you're in a better spot. So if you get a chance, you should not sleep on Rampage World Tour, because it's a really fun evolution of the classics idea. All 3 enormous creatures are still present in the game, so George the Ape, Lizzie the Lizard and Ralph the Wolf, and a whole world is just waiting to be conquered. So dropping buildings, eating civilians, knocking planes off the sky and massacring military left and right is what you'll involve yourself in going from one city to another. And that fun multiplayer romp that makes any Rampage, this or original, so fun, is the sole reason why I could never push my way through to that arcade cabinet as a kid, as it was always surrounded by a full set of players. Maxis made their mark on history by releasing various excellent simulations, be it life, ant, city or anything in between. They basically monopolized the genre scene and had no real competition there. So, naturally, they wanted to expand into other kinds of games, to thread the unknown to them waters and try something new and exciting. And since they've semi-hit it off with Simcopter, which perhaps wasn't a huge success but was rather well received, they felt safe to try something else out. You know, sometimes it's best to stick to what you know, what you're good at, and try to innovate within your sphere of competences rather than go for something entirely different. And other than Gordon Ramsay, there's not many that manage to do 180 and succeed. Because if you stray from your usual path too much, you may end up with Streets of SimCity. And don't get me wrong here, the idea was solid, but the execution, well, it was not. Because it seems that Maxis aimed to release something akin to Interstate 76, which was a really good game. And since they didn't have the know-how on how to make something similar, they aimed to lure both types of gamers in. Those who loved SimCity 2000 by allowing them to import their own creations into Streets, and all the other ones by going for the action-packed racing with guns and imitating other, already successful game. And you know what? Initially it looked as if they sorta succeeded, gaining little interest behind the idea, but in the end they failed in bringing it to life. While you can import your own cities, there's 5 types of missions and 5 vehicles to choose from, and you can arm and upgrade them between the action-packed sequences using money earned, the gameplay is just not there. It feels very lackluster. The enemies are not overly aggressive and just seem to be there, hanging around rather than actively doing their best to get you. The roadside elements like trees and telephone poles are just all a mirage that you can drive through, and the game's plagued with clipping issues. And don't get me started on the explosions. They look like cheap fireworks that failed to explode in full. If that wasn't enough, the streets suffered from serious performance problems. I remember comparing it to a few years older Screamer or even aforementioned Interstate 76, and it looked way worse while running considerably less fluid too. In the end, while Streets was definitely a wrong bet on the side of Maxis, it may have been that kick in the ass that they needed to stop fooling around and focus on what they were actually great at. And it may have been what semi-indirectly was responsible for SimCity 3000 releasing in just under 2 years from then. And as we know now, it was excellent and something that Maxis knew very well how to make to work. 1995's Warlords 2 Deluxe, an improved and enhanced version of 1993's original, was a game I spent countless hours playing with 2 friends of mine back in the day. It provided nearly everything I like about games. Fantasy setting, familiar races and units, experience progression for heroes, simple quests, armies-based combat, and huge maps with a lot to discover and conquer. And if you add to it countless scenarios, even those based on Lord of the Rings books, it made for a perfect multiplayer experience. If you had someone there to play it with, that is. Preferably 7 of those other someones. So, Warlords 3 Reign of Heroes had a rather large boots to fill in. And you know what, for all intents and purposes, being a turn-based strategy with role-playing undertones, it did not fail to deliver. It's basically the same game, but even better. So the graphics and sounds are of much higher quality, even if still rather unimpressive for the time that the game came out in, and only ever slightly saved, so to speak, by the addition of support for very high resolution displays, allowing for smooth gameplay in 1024x768 resolution. Gameplay loop for the most part stayed untouched too, and still focuses on capturing cities, which in turn allow you to have more and more better units and, well, capture even more cities. Then there are some simple city improvements to be built, but they're rather superficial and you can't really change much more in the game. You build armies, you grab cities, then build some more, capture a few new ones, rinse and repeat with an occasional battle against an enemy to break the monotony. Each army stack can be built out of 8 units and all the battles are played out automatically. You can sorta choose the order of attacks and unit composition, but that's pretty much it. You don't take active part in combat, just observe the results. So, same as you did in 1993, all the tactics are relegated to pre-battle configuration of armies. You can substitute one of the units in army with a hero, and this can be one of the many thematically appropriate classes of Shaman, General, Wizard, Thief, Warrior, Priest, Paladin, Necromancer, Vampire or Ranger. And they can gain up to 10 levels and offer additional battle skills and spells that can turn the tides of many encounters. It's not only heroes though, and some stronger units offer additional battle boons too. Like dragons increase fear in enemies, or Night Lords adding morale and attack strength to your troops. This may not be as immediately noticeable as hero bonuses are, but they stack, so if you have few of these special units, the effects can actually be pretty significant. So, all that put together should pretty much guarantee Warlords 3's success, right? Well, it was better than the earlier ones were, no doubt about that. But it also had one very serious issue. Let's have some fun. I'd like you to guess what it was. And I don't mean outdated gameplay or simple combat mechanics even. I'll give you 5 seconds to try and then make sure to let me know if you got it right in the comments below. So, 5 seconds, and go! Alright, I hope you got it. The biggest problem that Warlords 3 had was Heroes of Might and Magic 2. Well, by 1997 it was actually Heroes 2 with its incredible Price of Loyalty add-on that we've even spoke about today. And while it was not a one-to-one kind of a title, it was directed at the very similar subset of gamers, and however you wanna look at it, Heroes 2 was incomparably better. Warlords 3 was great, really it was, for a sequel to an older game that is, but Heroes 2, even more so than the first one, started off a near cult-like following with its incredible addicting loop, beautiful graphics and music, and very tactical but also easy to comprehend and appreciate by the non-strategy gamer combat. Simply put, it was much better than Warlords could ever hope to be. Achtung Spitfire is a sequel to Over the Reich, even if it takes place before the events of the first game, and it's also a turn-based strategy, this time covering various air combat battles during World War II. It includes British, German and French planes and covers campaigns for all 3 of them. But if you complete them all, you can easily create your own custom scenarios with included scenario builder that extends the game's longevity considerably. It uses same, albeit polished engine that the previous title did, so if you played the first, you'll feel right at home in this one. There are numerous different planes for all the sites available, and each and every one of them feels different, if that even makes sense in a strategy. They are so realistically represented in fact that at the time of its release, Achtung Spitfire was also considered to be partly a simulation, which sounds a bit silly now from the perspective of time, but realism is definitely something that cannot be denied to it. And that realism, I'm afraid, comes with a bit of an issue of its own. Since Achtung Spitfire is a computerization of a board game, you can pretty much guess that it's not an easy one, and that the rules are rather complex, with many factors influencing one another. And it's precisely the case. Which would not be an issue if not for the fact that the instructions that came with the game were rather limited and more like a booklet really. Now, it's no biggie today when we can find detailed descriptions of everything online, video reviews, previews and tutorials, but back then it would be a serious detractor from playing. Interestingly enough, the difficulty choice in Achtung Spitfire is the most unique thing about it, because instead of lowering the complexity of the game or lowering the number of enemies when brought down, as it would have worked in most other games, it only changes range of your control. Meaning that at the lowest, when you play as a squad leader, you only have few choices that you can make during encounters, so you won't get overwhelmed with an ocean of options that you'd get playing at the general level. In the end, Achtung Spitfire is an interesting strategy, and if you like those and are into planes and World War II, it's definitely something worth your time. Even today. No, especially today. Claw is a 2D side-scrolling action platformer that twists our 15th century history into its alternate version, where instead of humans, the world is populated by two opposing races of anthropomorphic cats and dogs. You play as Captain Claw, an infamous and notorious handsome cat pirate who, after being caught and imprisoned at La Roca, learns about the mysterious Amulet of 9 Lives, which is said to grant near immortality. So, he breaks out of the prison and sets off to find and recover said magical item. The game will see you going through a series of 14 levels thematically appropriate to the route that you'll take to get to the treasure, and some of them will end with a boss fight. Every one of them though looks and feels different, and the latter ones take rather long to complete, making Claw a pretty sizable adventure. All stages are filled with both environmental hazards like traps, spikes and pits to name a few, and enemies galore, from big to small, all out to get our hero. You have a sword, a pistol with limited ammunition, dynamite and even special magic claw ability however, so you're far from being defenseless. Your mission will not only see you fighting, no, it's a platformer at heart after all. So a good deal of time jumping, hopping all over the moving or disappearing platforms and swinging on vines, ropes and the likes is what you'll be mainly doing. There are also special weapon pickups and hidden levels accessible via warps to spice up the gameplay. The story is told via intermissions, via animated cutscenes, and these are really well made, adding a lot to the atmosphere of it all. Presentation-wise, objectively speaking, Claw is beautiful, sporting high-resolution sprite artwork that moves and animates at super smooth frame rates looking like a cartoon, all on lush and colorful backgrounds. That said, personally I prefer my 2D platformers low-res, cause then they have that undeniable retro charm then. But that's me, and like I said, objectively, Claw looks incredible. Sounds are as good as the graphics, so overall it's an excellent package for any and all fans of the genre. But believe it or not, that's not all. Because the game features built-in level editor that allows for creation of your own stages and even importing of those made by others, extending the playability of Claw near infinitely. Cool, right? And yet, that's still not all. Because Claw keeps on giving, offering numerous multiplayer gameplay modes and even 64 people LAN option, which is just unbelievable if you keep in mind that it was released in 1997. Claw is a true gem and one of the best platformers of its generation. Need for Speed 2 SC is a, well, special edition of the arcade racing game released earlier the very same year. It's basically the same brilliant and addictive racing title as the 2 was, with some tweaks, changes and additions. So, in this extended version, official support for 3DFX acceleration was finally added, making it look extra beautiful on supported hardware, and virtually indistinguishable from the basic game if you did not own it. But such were the days of early acceleration. Even if you didn't own 3DFX card, SE was still worth owning if you were a fan of the game, as it added 4 new cars to pick between for a total of 12. And these are McLaren F1, Ferrari F50, Lotus GT1, Jaguar XJ220, Ford GT90, is there a Commendatore 112i, and yes, that's how it's pronounced, Ital Design Kala, Lotus Esprit V8, Ferrari F355 F1, Ford Mustang Mach-3, Ital Design C2 and Ford Indigo. Each of them naturally feels and looks entirely different, and while initially I remember always going for the fastest with a buddy of mine that I used to race against, eventually when we mastered this we started racing others, just to add the variety to our time attacks. Other than that, 3 new unlockable cars are added too, 1 new track called Last Resort, and 1 new racing style aptly named Wild. Everything else stayed true to the original, so 3 gameplay modes of single player, tournament and knockout, 4 camera options, 3 of which are outer views and 1 from the dashboard, different weather conditions and traffic. At the time of its release, Need for Speed 2 and its SE version were probably the most well-known and popular racing games on PC, and for good reason. They offered unparalleled quality graphics and sounds, true to life at least as much as technology allowed for, models of cars, trucks and trackside objects, and most importantly, were a blast to race. And while Need for Speed 2 SE may not be my favorite entry in the series, that would be the incredible Underground 2, it was still the one I played on PC the most. Nightmare Creatures is a game made solely based on the demonic nature of my boss's wife. She is, after all, what Devil banished to Earth to haunt us until the end of time, as he couldn't stand there in hell with him, being way more evil and mean than he could ever hope to become. And since there can only be one ruler of the underworld, he didn't want to risk losing the position to her. Especially that at the time of her spawning into existence, it was only 2, maybe 3000 years away from the next election for the position of the Lord of Evil. And she is an immortal, immoral and terrible creature of the dark that would outlive the devil with ease. As I'm watching the footage of it now, it becomes painfully obvious that it actually is not a game based on the monstrosity. I have an unpleasantness of being around way more often than I'd like. But a third-person perspective gothic-themed brawler. Oh well. Nightmare Creatures takes place in a Victorian London setting where evil wizard Adam Crowley is summoning all types of ungodly creatures to plunge the city into terror and spread chaos and mayhem everywhere. Naturally, what you'll need to do is go through the creatures to get to Crowley and stop him. And you can play as either Ignatius, a staff-wielding monk, or Natasha, a sword-wielding fighter. They have their own unique gameplay mechanics and fighting styles, and overall feel distinctively different when playing. The enemies are interesting, especially the bosses, and it's pretty fun to mold them down, initially. With time, you begin to realize that they feel very spongy, soaking the damage as if it was nothing, and even though blood splattering from them looks really fun, it only ever does for the first few encounters, and after that you grow increasingly more tired with the amount of work needed to put any of the attackers down. Now, you can use special items when you have them, but when you don't, combat feels very grindy. Not to mention the controls that are a bit floaty and less than stellar camera. But if you don't mind it all, then there's quite a decently looking for the time and playing title that will no doubt keep you engaged for a while. Personally, I feel that Nightmare Creatures really shows its age in gameplay design and don't think that I'll be touching it again. Especially that it keeps reminding me of that terrible, awful woman. KKND Crash Kill and Destroy Extreme is the same game as basic KKND, but with native Windows support, 20 new missions, 15 multiplayer maps, so-called Chaos Mode, stereo sound and some much needed bug fixes to the original codebase. The end. That's it. That's all I have to say about it, and let's jump into our next game. Nah, I wouldn't do that. Not because I couldn't, because of course I can, but because I fear the wrath of 1,000 angry RTS players that would have with a shroud of a doubt fall upon me in the series of well-put and on-point angry comments that would burn like thousands of consecutive bee stings, all aimed at the same spot. So I'd rather avoid it. The original KKND is the first in the trilogy of post-apocalyptic real-time strategy games. In 2140, after the world has collapsed, 2 remaining factions fight for control of the Earth and its last remaining resources worth anything. Especially, most important of them, oil. They are the survivors, so humans who waited out the destruction underground in relative safety, and the evolved, mutants who survived the catastrophe on the surface. Oil is used as the primary resource to earn the currency required to construct buildings and train units. Interestingly enough, most buildings can be upgraded multiple times to unlock new options within them. Both factions have entirely different sets of units, with survivors utilizing high-tech vehicles of various kinds and evolved mainly using mutated animals. And both of them have their own 15-mission-long campaigns. Gamers and critics alike seem to love KKND when it released, so it not only sold quite well, but also spawned 2 follow-up titles in the coming years. Star Trek Generations is a first-person shooter with some other genres mixed in various amounts for good measure, and all of that based on the same titled 1994 movie. And the events of the game are closely related to those in the motion picture too. Everything naturally takes place in the Next Generation universe and can see the crew of Enterprise D respond to a distress signal from Amargo's observatory. When there, Commander William T. Riker, also known as Sleazy Riker, upon investigating the incident, meets Dr. Tolian Soran, a scientist genius that's sadly gone mad. And now Soran intends on doing whatever's necessary to return to the so-called Nexus, a paradise dimension. And what is necessary seems to involve destroying various stars, hoping to create a pathway to the dimension. Naturally, since he doesn't know which star will be capable of manifesting such occurrence, he needs to destroy them one by one till he gets to the right one, without any care put to any life on the planets orbiting these stars. Now, learning all that, Enterprise goes on a chase trying to catch Soran before he causes any irreversible damage to the universe. The gameplay is rather non-linear and allows for taking of different paths to complete it. So you'll spend a lot of time in stellar cartography on Enterprise in strategic mode, trying to figure out where Soran will strike next in order to travel there to stop him. Whenever a crew member, be it Riker, Worf or Kirk, beams to the planet or space station, the game switches into first-person shooter mode that also features some basic adventuring elements. To complete the away mission, you need to find and battle Soran, where usually moments before getting killed, he beams away and escapes. But that particular star in the system is saved in the process, so it's a win, I suppose. Whenever in space, Enterprise can be attacked by enemy ships, and when that happens, the game moves into sorta tactical simulation mode, which is not overly difficult, but a nice refresher to the rest of the title nonetheless. Star Trek Generations mixes many genres with an interesting and captivating story, and some full-motion video sequences to provide a rather fun experience to all fans of the series. So gamers such as myself will love it. Others should give it a go and make their own mind about it, as while it works fine as a combination of many smaller parts, neither of its building blocks is particularly great. Outlaws is a Western-themed first-person shooter that takes place in American Old West and is set in and around a small remote town. You play as Marshal James Anderson, ex-fastest gun in the West, ex-Batch, and current landowner and family man. When he refuses to sell to one Bob Graham, Bob hires the toughest and roughest men he can find so that they would use any means necessary to change Anderson's mind. And since these are simple men, the so-called any means to them is always killing. So, when you return home from a trip one day, finding your house aflame, wife killed and daughter kidnapped by Bob's henchmen, you do what any good father would. So, break down internally, gear up like John Wick externally, and head off to save your child and on a mission of bloody revenge, destroying anything and anyone that will stand in your way. And if you think that there's no wrath like the one of a mother who lost her child, you'd not seen Marshal Anderson. The man is a maniac. Well, you'll get to control him, so you'll know soon enough. There are no supernatural or sci-fi elements in the game, and it's a simple tale of revenge and thousands of bodies laid to rest for betting on the wrong horse, so to speak. All weapons like revolvers, rifles, dynamite or shotguns to name a few are rather down to earth too, and Outlaws is credited to be one of the very first FPSs to use manual reloading mechanic and sniper zoom. It's also one of the very few games from the 90s that at the highest difficulty level tried to simulate realistic bullet damage, meaning 1, at most 2 hits were enough to kill our protagonist. Presentation-wise, while not real 3D like Quake, Outlaws looks excellent using its engine to the fullest. Engine that for years I thought of as being build engine used in Duke Nukem 3D, when in fact it was LucasArts' own Jedi engine. A very similar in terms of both looks and capabilities perhaps, but a different one nonetheless. Most of the level decorations and buildings look era appropriate, so do the weapons and enemies that you'll face. And the cutscenes are a masterpiece, but I wouldn't expect anything else from LucasArts. Other than the standard single player, Outlaws features also a secondary historical missions mode, which is a series of separate missions depicting James Anderson's rise to the rank of US Marshal. This sees you hunting various criminals and preferably, but not necessarily, recover stolen by them gold too. To summarize, Outlaws is one of the best 1990s 2.5D FPSs, if you don't mind the western setting that is. If it's a game breaker for you though, better stick to something else, as in Outlaws it's from when you first run it till the very end. Sega Rally Championship was a gigantic success in the arcades, in which it spawned in 1995. It sported 4 hella fast and beautiful tracks to race on, 3 entirely different cars, and an arcade racing goodness galore, swallowing coins from speed-craving players like a deranged and upright hungry hippo. A hippo that was so heavy it didn't move and relied on coins to be delivered to it. And they were. The game was universally loved, praised for its graphics, sensation of speed and fun factor. It was not realistic, however, but it didn't matter. Its player base wanted frantic action and not complicated mechanics. It was bound to be a huge success on PC then. It was, but it wasn't, if that even makes sense. In 1997, when Sega Rally Championship finally dropped on PC, it was met with a huge range of other arcade racing games. Some also in the rally theme, others like Need for Speed more focusing on street racing, and likes of Screamer 2, kinda but not really, covering both. And while not much changed for Sega Rally Championship other than the improved effects and in-game music, it proved to be too little too late. Because while it was still an excellent arcade racer, as compared to the others that were already established, it offered less features, tracks, cars, and was not even as fun or fast. It was just one of the many in the background of few greats. Is it worth playing then? Of course it is. It's still really good, it's just nowhere near the best, that's all. There are possibly 3 or 4, sometimes 5 at most games that define the generation, and first Tomb Raider was just that. A title that changed the gaming landscape forever. I mean, sure, we had some 3D platformers, we had some 3D shooters even, and we definitely had games with female protagonists. Albeit few, and other than Miss Pac-Man, most were rather forgettable. she was a star. No one who met her forgets about Miss Pac-Man. Anyway, we had it all, it seemed, and we couldn't be surprised by anything new or creative. And then came core design, and in pair with IDOS, they released Tomb Raider. And as they did, everything we thought we couldn't do or we didn't need was instantly proved wrong. Lara Croft came into our lives and changed them forever. Not to mention sparking imagination of countless teens with her big-chested figure. Releasing a year later, Tomb Raider 2 was two things for me. A surprise that it came out so soon, and a pickle. A mystery to solve, as well being technically same but different. It felt to me as different but the same. I know, no such saying, but I just coined it, so deal with it. What do I mean by that? Well, while the gameplay stayed largely the same, placing our big boob heroine in the center of it all, shooting and platforming her way around enemies and various puzzles, the focus of the game seemed to have changed a little. While the first title was, at least for me, mostly an action-packed game with some puzzling and adventuring elements thrown here and there to keep it interesting, the second felt as if it was focusing more on adventuring and puzzling and using action sequences just to let you get from one riddle to another. Now, don't get me wrong here, I'm not saying that it was a bad choice, quite the opposite actually, but the shift was more than obvious. And sure, there were technically more combat encounters in the second Tomb Raider than in the first, but they felt more like action sequences in an adventure movie rather than the main part of that movie itself. So, while the format would evolve and in time it would become the new norm for both Tomb Raider and Uncharted, and countless games trying to be either for that matter too, the first attempt felt a bit out of place. That's how I feel though, and you don't have to agree. Anyway, what can I say here that you don't know about it already? It's a super fun title and one definitely worth experiencing, if not for its gameplay, then at least to learn where all these modern hits came from. Oh, and in Tomb Raider 2, Lara is trying to stop Venetian crime lord from obtaining a mythical legendary dagger of Xian that is said to have magical powers, allowing wielder to turn into all-powerful dragon if they pierce their own heart with it. So yeah, there's an adventure and a half awaiting you in this one. Unlike Sega Rally Championship that we've spoke about a couple of minutes ago, Virtua Cup that also originated in the arcades, when it landed on PC, it was a de facto the best game of its kind. So, on-rail mouse-driven arcade shooter. Sure, it had competitors eagerly awaiting its arrival too, imitating its gameplay formula. Some better and some worse. But neither reached the similar polish and quality heights. Now, I'm not a silly goose, silly potato perhaps, but not a goose. And I know that it was just for a little while, and it was bested in time. In fact, its second part dropped on PC the very same year, and it was a much better game. But it didn't change anything then and there, when Virtua Cup appeared on our great boxes, it was the best. Sure, it's from the arcade's design has similar issues to Sega Rally, meaning it was made to chew coins at a machine gun speed, which meant that it was challenging but featured a very small selection of stages. 3, to be precise. And while in the arcades where the difficulty is ramped up to the max and every attempt costs money, it took way longer to go through it all, at home, when you paid nothing for playing, well, other than the initial purchase price that is, it was completed and mastered by most in no time. And the free levels proved to be a very limiting amount of content for the in-home gamer. Now, I don't want to say that 1997 was the year, cause that's clearly not the case. I'd say it started earlier with the release of original PlayStation, but mid-90s were the time when the arcades started dying off and the coin-munching game design began fading away. On a side note, we're in the microtransaction era now and it equally sucks. But I digress. What I really wanna say here is that Virtua Cup is good, but too short to pay the full price for. And it was like that even in 1997, despite being the best title in its very specific genre. Story-wise, you're playing as one of two cups, or two of them if you have a friend with you, and you're on a super secret, totally not sanctioned by the higher-ups mission of bringing down an evil crime syndicate. As you go through what feels like thousands of bodies, you get to find and use better weapons and even fight some end-level bosses. Sounds like fun? Good, cause it is. It's also short, so definitely try it out, but don't go out of your way spending a lot on it. F-22 Raptor is the first of Novologic's flight combat simulation games to use polygonal terrain rather than one based on voxels like they did in previous titles, which given the prompt advancements in technology made it look more realistic. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. Novologic was a well-known developer, especially for the realistic approach to simulations and focus on as true-to-life models as possible. And with F-22, they even cooperated with Lockheed Martin, the manufacturer of the real F-22, on an underlying workings of their engine for the game. That said, upon release, F-22 Raptor was quickly touted as an arcade simulation by hardcore fans of the genre because of how easy it was to fly it and perform various air maneuvers. Now, the real-life plane was pretty well known to be easier than most others to pilot too, but not as much as in the game. That said, I didn't mind it and actually prefer my simulations to be more arcadey as I perform in them much better. But I'm anything but hardcore, so don't base your opinion on it of me. Raptor features 5 linked campaigns of 7 to 9 missions each and 14 separate single missions to try your skill set. And this will take you all around the world to various locations and are dynamic in their design, meaning that if you destroy something in one mission, if another will use the same map, that thing will remain destroyed. F22 Raptor's presentation is fantastic. Both 5-channel surround sound and beautifully rendered locations you'll be flying in are excellent. And playing the game using good headphones or a surround speaker setup on a big screen was a true pleasure for the senses. All that, however, came at the price. And upon its release, Raptor was rather power hungry. And while it didn't require MMX CPU per se, having one could considerably boost your frame rates. In the end, Raptor can be an excellent time even today because it drops hyper-realism in favor of fun. And it is. Fun to play, that is. Which is not something that I could say about all of those older, extremely realistic games. Incubation, time is running out, is what I feel whenever I eat something with gluten and there's no bathroom anywhere nearby. The time is running out and something is definitely incubating. It was also often considered to be Battle Isle 4, even though it has very little to do with any islands and doesn't follow the same strategic gameplay formula. It shared the world and developer though, so I suppose that's the reason behind it. In reality, it's a survival horror turn-based team tactical game with some very superficial RPG elements. The campaign is played out on a series of different maps, each of them uniquely looking, but most of the time following the same objective of having to survive it all against all odds. And trust me, this will not be stacked in your favor. Gameplay-wise, Incubation is very similar to the tactical portion of XCOM games, giving a squad of units appropriate number of action points per each turn, and this can be used for movement, attacks, item use or setting up in defensive positions. I mean, if you played XCOM, you'll feel right at home in Incubation, all the way to the feeling of dread whenever a new alien is discovered. Arguably, it's a much simpler game forfeiting many of the overarching concepts of the classic, featuring less weapons and alien types, so only 12 of each, but more than making up for it with scary and dark atmosphere. It was made for you to be afraid, and you will, as you're almost always leading your squad against an overwhelming enemy force. Some of those enemies are bosses that appear only once or twice in the whole campaign, so in reality the real number of different kinds of opponents is even lower than 12. All your men have their own stats, gear and weapons, and you have to remember to train them when possible to make sure that they're always up to the challenge. Story-wise, the equipment failure in the colonial city of Sky Halawa has introduced a virus to it that caused indigenous inhabitants of it to mutate and change into bloodthirsty Sky Ger. Terrible names, I must add. They feel as if they were crafted to be tongue twisters and nothing more. I mean, the city could be called, let's say, Caprica, and aliens, I don't know, something easier like Cylons. No relation to robotic Cylons or the planet Caprica from Battlestar Galactica. These were but mere examples. The campaign is composed out of around 30 missions and will see you for the most part halting enemy attacks, trying to survive and saving any and all remaining colonists. Rinse and repeat until the end. Theirs or yours. Lens of Lore Guardians of Destiny is a sequel to 1993's Throne of Chaos, and a completely changed gameplay-wise title. I mean, it's still an RPG, but it's not using the tired grid-based movement formula anymore, but real-time fluid movement like Elder Scrolls or Ultima Underworld games. It's a rather fundamental change and one in a good direction, I feel. Anyway, your arch-nemesis from the first game, the witch Scotia, while plotting a revenge, accidentally kickstarted Belial, god of evil's resurrection. With her last dying breaths, she passed her shape-shifting powers onto her son Luther. She haven't had full control of her powers while dying though, so she passed them in damaged form. And Luther can't control what or he transforms into, and you're gonna be playing as him this time. Which, as you can pretty much guess, is a bit troublesome. I mean, let's imagine you're in an inn, having drinks with your fellow adventurers and one red-haired dwarf. I mean, you gotta be inclusive, right? Even if he stinks a little. Anyway, suddenly a group of bandits raid the inn and demand payment from all the patrons. Now, naturally, you being the hero that you are, oppose them, vouching to save the innocents and kick their asses. Big time. And sometime, during a bloody and difficult combat, just when you were laying justice left and right, you transform into a tube of toothpaste. I mean, what kind of danger would a tube like that pose? None, unless someone would pick it up and start squirting toothpaste at enemy's eyes. But then, if you transform back, what would that missing toothpaste be? Your innards? Poop? There's no way of knowing. Anyway, the terrible curse aside, cause that's definitely not a gift, being the son of a hated villain, you're not the most popular person in the lands either. So, you set off on an adventure to find a way to cure yourself and also stop recently awoken Belial. On a more serious note, the only creatures you really transform into are a humanoid beast and a lizard. The first being stronger and able to smash various obstacles into pieces, and second more agile and able to cast magic spells. There are no standard per quest or kill experience points rewards in Guardians of Destiny. Instead, skills and combat styles that you use in encounters will increase upon use. It's an interesting choice and one I don't mind at all. Lands of Lore's presentation is rather nice. I mean, it's nowhere near what the best FPS games of the time looked like, but for an RPG, it's okay. And feature plenty digitized characters and assets. Overall, if you enjoy RPGs, there's a lot to like here and you should definitely give it a go. At the time of its release, MDK was considered a groundbreaking, ultra cool and classic in the making game. Those assumptions were not that far off, as the game was indeed hella fun to play, and is to this day remembered by many as one of the biggest hits of its time. Was it really groundbreaking and an all-time classic though? Well, that's another thing entirely and something all of you will have to decide for yourself, preferably after trying it out. Personally, I wouldn't go as far, though I agree that it's great. Anyway, it's a third-person action-adventure shooter with some platforming elements in which you play a scared hectic, a cool name I must add, especially for the futuristic janitor, and you're somehow the chosen one, and the only one that can save the Earth from invading alien forces. I mean, I'm sure you've grown tired of it by now, but you really are the one to save us again. So space janitor or not, we count on you. Over the course of 6 missions, you have to destroy alien machinery that's used to damage our planet, kill their commanders, hundreds upon hundreds of various enemies, and finally their evil boss, Gunter Glatt. The level design in MDK is incredibly linear, though it never really feels like it, as the stages are all unique and full of little touches making them feel special, big and new. Each level is split into smaller stages, making you feel like you're constantly beating new challenges and progressing further, which you kinda are anyway, but this just multiplies the sensation. Now, a game like that naturally needs to have various power-ups and pickups. And it does, quite a few of these actually. And the most interesting of them all is the world's smallest nuclear bomb, that's used to open doors out of all things. Hilarious, right? And for good reason, because despite the heavy underlying plot and action-packed gameplay, MDK is actually very light-hearted and full of humorous encounters. Other than the bomb that you can pick up, you're wearing this futuristic battlesuit that allows you to glide, has a built-in chain gun that can even snipe enemies from a distance, and you'll be using a lot. Both against enemies and in some of the environmental puzzling challenges. If I was to make a tactical mistake and decide on summarizing MDK in one sentence, I'd say that it's a beautiful, crazy 3D run and gunner in which you have to get from point A to point B, killing everything in your way, cause that's precisely what it is. So if you never played it, seek it out and give it a chance. You'll love it. POD Gold is a compilation release of the earlier base game POD Planet of Death and its expansion pack Back to Hell. It's also a dark dystopian sci-fi racing game unlike any other of its time. It takes place on this remote planet that's a near paradise. It's beautiful and popular, and huge futuristic cities are the only pollutant on its scenic views. That said, we would have no Dark Racer if that was all, and we do, so something must have happened. In this particular case, one of the mining machines accidentally uncovered some kind of an ancient virus, spore or fungus of some sorts that started growing at a rapid pace, quickly overtaking the planet. And at the speed that it's progressing, there will soon be no civilization left on it. So, wealthy people started leaving, there are only few seats left on the last few shuttles, and residents who were fearless were given the opportunity to compete in series of ultra-fast races for the last few spots. POD Gold comes with 16 original and 16 expansion pack tracks for a total of 32, and 16 entirely unique cars to choose from, all customizable too, allowing you to make them your own and to fit your racing style. But in reality, even though it has an interesting backstory, different vehicles and tracks, POD is all about speed. And at the time of its release, it was one of the best looking and definitely fastest racers on PC. And you know what? It's hella fun too. All tracks are uniquely designed and an arcade heaven, rewarding high-risk perfect driving, but also punishing for mistakes. So, if you're into that kind of loop at all, don't sleep on it and check it out. And yes, it's good today too. It's kinda like Wipeout, a fun timeless racer. Oh, I'm gonna earn some hate with this one. I can already sense it, with my force no less. Whatever. So, I don't particularly like X-Wing vs TIE Fighter, but before you send a thunderstorm or a wavy ocean of nerds planning my way in the comments below, hear me out. I mean, if you wanna do it, but still hear me out. I never hid that I prefer Star Trek to Star Wars, and it's not even the reason here. I just wanna get it out of the way, so we know it's not a factor. X-Wing vs TIE Fighter had a new game engine, and a pretty good one for the time at that too, much better AI than previous titles did, expanded scripting, excellent sound design and graphics, and all of it was a huge step up over its predecessors. On top of that, multiplayer allowed for up to 4 people to pew it out online, and 8 over LAN. So, since everything was so cool and feature-packed, why didn't it resonate with me? Well, because it was basically a Quake-free arena but in space. The multiplayer dogfights and various combat scenarios were excellent, and it played like a charm against a friend, a few of them, or a group of strangers. If you could play it like that. And I couldn't. For me, running it off a beaten modem on a very expensive dial-up connection and at questionable speed was nigh impossible. And single player? Well, it's hard to call few missions clearly designed to teach you how to play the game in multi, a single-player campaign. And the plot encompassing it all was not LucasArts worthy, and something that I could have came up with all by myself, heavily intoxicated in a pub somewhere, eating a fatty burger and writing it all down on a greasy napkin. So, while I understand why it's so loved, I couldn't care much for it. Now, feel free to do what you will with it. The Adventures of Lomax is a spin-off of the Lemmings franchise and a side-view action platformer. You play as Lomax, a lemming knight, and the only one that has resisted wicked evil Ed's curse, turning all others into his mindless henchmen. Bada beep, bada boom, and that's how we cover a backstory in one sweep sentence. Also, there's not that much of it, so it wasn't that challenging really. Anyway, you set off on a quest to save all of your friends, find evil Ed and defeat him. You're not alone on this adventure though, as somewhere along your journey, elderly wizard Lorok will begin to help you, sharing his priceless advices. The game is divided into 4 worlds of 3 levels each and will see you defeating brainwashed enemies that have been turned into zombies, cowboys and aliens. And you do it using your signature spin attack, which is as useful in turning corrupted bad lemmings into good ones as it is for you to avoid taking damage from attacks. Interestingly enough, healed lemmings do what they did in their original game, so go straight to the nearest platform ledge and jump off of it, which is actually a common misconception as real lemmings don't do that at all. That's unimportant here whatsoever, but I believe it was worth mentioning. As you traverse through corrupted worlds, you'll be picking up scattered coins because, you know, lemming or no lemming, you have to live off something, and when plenty enough are collected, you earn an extra life. You can also find the magic helmet that will grant you a single hit immunity and some extra skills. In addition to a standard platforming fare of running, jumping and the likes, Lomax can use few of the abilities that the classic lemmings could do and some that they couldn't. So bridge building, blowing up the obstacles and throwing a flaming helmet to name a few. If you're looking at Lomax and thinking that you've seen something very similar before, you are not wrong. It was designed by Henk Nieborg, the one responsible for Flink and Lionheart, and it is graphically very similar to Flink. Since we're on the subject, Lomax's presentation is fantastic. It's colorful, super smoothly animated and sports rather big sprites and a lot of them at times. I mean, you wouldn't expect anything else from Psygnosis, but even if you did, it's always nice to see it fully realized. Sounds are pretty good too, though not on the same quality level as the graphics. Marrying of the puzzling lemmings formula with platforming was a courageous idea, and while it works on many levels, on as many it does not. So sadly, while Lomax is definitely a good game, it's not exceptional, and that's what we expected in the 1990s from every of Psygnosis' releases. TOCA Championship Racing is a very fun racer. It focuses on British Touring Car Championship in particular, featuring all the teams, their cars and drivers from mid-1990s, and real-life circuits too. It's in this weird spot though. As a game that is, cause on one hand, when driving it feels like an arcade racer, granted a sophisticated one, but arcade nonetheless. And in the same time, it features realistically represented damage model, different performing and feeling cars, and real tracks. It seems like it wants to be both at the same time and can't decide which of them more. And while with many games it would relegate them to become easily forgettable, TOCA somehow made it work. And while it's really neither of the two, and instead of an amalgamation of both, it works so well and it's such a riot to drive around that if you care about racing scene at all, it will be hell of a fun game to sink some hours in. It features 9 circuits of Donington, Silverstone, Truxton, no, not the cool Genesis shooter one, Brands Hatch Indy, Outland Park Fosters, Croft, Knockhill and Snetterton. And if you keep counting them and always somehow end up with 8 names only, it's okay, you're not losing your mind. Well, at least not because of this in particular. And it's all because Donington Truck comes in 2 flavors, GP and a shorter version of it. And while this could never rival the likes of Need for Speed 2 or Screamer 2 in terms of variety and lush backgrounds, they're all distinctively different from one another. Some are bumpy, others are corner hell, while different ones may be focusing on long straights. You won't get bored in TOCA is what I'm saying here. Graphics are rather nice, perhaps not on the same level as in the aforementioned hits, but you won't be complaining that they're blunt or uninspired. And the sounds are pretty good too. Music sucks a little, I mean it's not bad per se, it just don't really fit to the kind of racing you'll be doing, so turn it off, play some of your own or just focus on the sounds, listening to the cues that can actually offer pretty useful input on what's happening around you and with your car. TOCA is fun. If you like racing, it's a no-brainer. But if you're an occasional racer only, there are more enticing and better games than it available. The 2 I mentioned already, or even Colin McRae Rally that released few months later and was way better. Wing Commander Prophecy is the fifth in the long-running series of sci-fi space opera combat simulation games. Following Confederation's victory in the Border Worlds conflict from the fourth game, Galaxy is once more at peace. Or so it seems. And soon enough, TCS Midway, a brand new and spunking, still shining and not even scratched yet state-of-the-art multi-purpose carrier, intercepts a distress call from the Kilrathi, a cat-like aggressive race of warriors and a long-time enemies of a human race. In Prophecy, you take control of Lance Casey, the whitest sounding name you've ever heard, and the most generic one too. I mean, he sounds like the guy that always stands somewhere in the background in Battlestar Galactica whenever they're sitting in Cantina and playing cards. And he's the one who's slightly to the side so that the camera only ever slightly catches him in focus. In Wing Commander, he's the protagonist. That said, and jokes aside, I love those early junky FMV sequences, so I may be kidding here, but also really enjoy watching the numerous cutscenes that are in the game. So, Prophecy starts off in the very first days of the conflict with the new alien species that's much deadlier than the Kilrathi, insectoid Nephilims. And throughout it, you will participate in various missions, patrolling areas of space, escorting other ships, search and destroy of enemy forces, and even defense of the TCS Midway. There's few different ships that you'll be flying, and the gameplay is for the most part identical to the previous games. So first-person perspective from inside the ship's cockpit. Each of the crafts has access to a different armament options, and you will need to utilize what they offer to the best of your abilities to succeed. Now, you being you, so a space combat veteran that saw hundreds of conflicts in all corners of the universe, are not someone I have to tell what to do. And I'm sure you'd win the war with Nephilims even without me. So please, don't take it the wrong way when I tell you what's required. I am aware of your experience and multiversal superhero status. All that was said to the others who watch my videos, not you in particular. Playing as the titular Wing Commander, you can obviously give orders to your wingmen and communicate with any other ship that will encounter. Missions end when you complete your objectives and dock with TCS Midway, and after each you'll be given a performance rating. In many ways, Prophecy is a callback to the original first game, as despite being one in real life, in-game you're not this epic hero that saved the universe countless times, you're a rookie. And focus is placed on performing well in encounters rather than theatrical heroics. Same as all other Wing Commander games when released, Prophecy established a new graphical benchmark for all space simulations on the market. And given that it supports 3D acceleration out of the box, it looks phenomenal, even to this day. Sure, the spaceship models are rather blocky by 2024 standards, but if you keep in mind that there's no drag in space, ships could be of any shapes really, cubes even. I mean, look at Star Trek. Borgs had cubes, and these were some of the fastest and most dangerous ships out there. Well, on the other hand, a cube is an easy target, so I don't know. But on the other, so third by now I think hand, if a cube sustains surface damage, it's big enough to be able to withstand it, with its most crucial systems buried deep within it. Oh my god, what am I even talking about here? Never you mind at all, Prophecy looks great, plays great, and you'll be great at it. I've left the best for last. Well, best may be a bit strong word for Postal, but if you ever were stressed and wanted to let some steam off mindlessly, then there were hardly anything better in 1997. Correction, there was GTA 2. So yeah, Postal was the second best thing to relax when your boss pissed you off, when someone refused to pay you back, or when the delivery man brought a package that looked as if he was in a wrestling match with it all throughout its way to your door. Point is, as a title to forget about your daily troubles, Postal was great. But what was it exactly rather than the tool to deal with depression? Well, it was this top-down isometric ultra-violent and disturbing shooter. The brutality it portrayed all around seemingly quiet and peaceful town was something that was not done before, and for a few good years after either. In short, you're this dude who finally lost it. You've done with being a content and law-abiding citizen? No, you wanna cause mayhem and destruction everywhere, and you will stop for nothing because you've nothing to lose. So you unleash your anger, frustration and deeply set maniacal tendencies on this small town initially, eventually the world, killing anyone that you meet. It makes no difference if they're all the ladies shopping, high school marching band, or just a couple coming back from a date night. If they're there when you're there, they'll soon be there no more. Postal does not discriminate. You lay waste to everyone and everything. Men, women, any ethnicity, animals, there's no end to your wrath, and you will not rest until you get them all. There's no point in seeking any deeper meaning of Postal spawning onto our PC's hard drives, the story behind it is superficial at best, the graphics and sounds, while not bad, are drowned in a sea of guts, gore and dismembered limbs, and it feels at times as if it was made for the shock factor only. I mean, it could be argued that brutal fatalities and blood splatters in Mortal Kombat were there for aesthetic purposes, that without them it wouldn't have made as big of an impact and become as popular, and I agree. But Postal? Oh man. It's so over the top, I don't see any other reason for its existence than to shock gamers, reviewers, regulators, or to allow us to stupidly release some Steam after a particularly stressful day. And as the latter, it actually works quite well. It's not a game you'd like to complete in one sitting over a weekend or something, as other than sick gameplay loop it offers close to no plot, but whenever something happens, you had a really bad day, there's hardly anything better for an hour or so. That said, I'm gonna share a little secret with you. All I just said up to this point is technically speaking a lie, because you don't have to do any of that at all. In fact, the way most of us played Postal is wrong. I mean, sure, the devs banked on it, that we'd do what we did, but in reality, to complete each level, all you have to do is kill the most of the hostiles. So people who actually shoot at you. You don't have to touch a single civilian or animal at all. Now that your mind is blown, how about you give it a chance and see if it's as fun when played as intended? Spoiler, it's not. Oh man, I was kinda putting most of them off as I'm not big on the genre, but 1997 was RTS rich, so sooner or later I had to get into them. I mean, we've covered the big ones already, but some of the lesser known ones were pretty good too, if you like the genre, that is. And 7th Legion is an excellent example of these. It shakes up the formula a little by dropping the resource gathering entirely instead of using so-called building points, which are gained in different amounts for enemy units' destruction and mission objectives completions. It was interesting as suddenly you didn't have to juggle army building with military efforts supporting gatherers and could completely focus on combat. That's not it though, and 7th Legion had few extra cards up its sleeve. Quite literally. Battle cards to be precise. Randomly dealt and offering various boon powers like damaging enemy troops or causing mechanical units malfunction, to name a few. These were not only random events keeping the game fresh though, there were also bonus boxes scattered around the map, and these too consisted of power-ups of various kinds like making players' units invisible or increasing your warrior's strength. And if you add to it units gaining experience and getting better, you'll end up with a unique take on RTS genre. Other than that, mechanically speaking, 7th Legion plays like any other RTS of the time, and places you either on the side of Chosen or so-called those who were left behind. First left ecologically ruined Earth centuries ago, seeking refuge and survival elsewhere, and just now came back to reclaim the planet. While the others, well, they were left behind and had to survive on very little that the planet still could offer. You know, bugs, beats and beers. And they are not willing to just handle it back to those who abandoned it. So, it's only natural that the conflict between the two factions quickly turned from a small flame into a raging fire of hate and warfare. If you like RTSs, you'll no doubt find something here. If you don't, it's hardly a game to turn you into a fan. Imperialism is a top-down turn-based strategy covering the imperialistic expansionism period of the 18th and 19th century, and you must do whatever it takes to develop your empire, for it to become the best out of all, the biggest and most dominant force in the world. You can do it by means of brutal military expansion, but there's also an option to extend your sphere of influence by political or economic solutions. Naturally, combination of all three works best. Interestingly enough, imperialism also included a mechanic allowing you to exploit underdeveloped nations. It's perhaps not ethical today, but very era appropriate. You can also invest and develop smaller independent states to have them later on naturally become part of your empire without ever sending a single military unit to them, all by supporting them and teaching them your values. The mercantile economy is modeled quite well in Imperialism 2 and represented realistically with fully fleshed out and working supply and demand system, so making sure that your economy is strong and sustainably built is a key to success in any way, be it by war, economically or by political means. And since we're on politics, not many strategies of the time offered such a deep and satisfying approach to it. You can do a lot with it. There are alliances, pacts, wars, subsidies, boycotts against particular nations, and embassies. And that's just scratching the surface. Combat encounters utilize an interesting chess-like engine that's as fun to learn as it is to use later on to telegraph your mental superiority over your opponent or CPU. Well, come to think of it, chess may not be the best description of it, but it at least gives you an idea how it plays out. Imperialism is a very elegant in its design title, mixing different gameplay elements into a comprehensive package that's near ideal. Only near because imperialism has one huge fault. It can be won by a vote of the council that meets every 10 years to pick the new world leader. So it's not unusual to win just as you were about to get to the most fun part of your many hours long strategy, and then, even being a winner, you can't really say that you're happy about it, as all you feel is being robbed of the culmination of your intricate plan, of the climax, so to speak. If you don't mind it, however, Imperialism is one of the best and most fun turn-based strategies of its time. Mage Slayer is a 3D top-down action game. Lord Kane of the Clan of Knowledge, a disappointingly named clan I must add, sounding like something from a teens-only sci-fi three-parter saga. Still salty about the betrayal that happened to him a millennium ago, gathered all the relics of the so-called Starstone and placed them under the protection of his thousands of minions. Now, I honestly don't know what the Starstone is, but not many things are worth a millennia worth of hate and bitterness. Most stones aren't. Still, since it's locked up, the remaining clans, which I'm sure are as terribly named too, send their best warriors to defeat Kane. I get that the story may seem unclear, simplistic and lacking logic, especially that it's retold in shortened version by yours truly, but trust me, it's irrelevant. All you need to know is that Mage Slayer is this very modern, at least at the time, take on the Gauntlet formula, and that it's hella fun, delivering heaps upon heaps of bloody combat. One corpse at a time, dropping around you like autumn leaves. So, you have a close-up melee and long-range projectile attacks, and mastering both is a key to success, especially that the game throws enemies at you like a machine gun, in incredibly vast numbers, one after another in series of soon-to-be your victims. Because you're you, and if there's 5, 10 or even a million of them, there's one too many of you for them to handle. Naturally, there's quite a lot of environmental puzzling in Mage Slayer too, so all kinds of sealed-off locations and doors opened by switches and buttons are nothing unusual, and required for both progression and to get to the areas containing amazing goodies. Stuff like invisibility potions or proximity bombs to name a few. There are some timed platform jumping puzzles too, so getting used to the controls ASAP is a must. Mage Slayer is composed out of 28 large multi-layered levels, and it's as fun to play today as it was years ago. Especially that given its perspective and how many indie games we get today, Mage Slayer's presentation does not feel outdated or lacking whatsoever. All in all, the game is a hoot, and an addictive gem that was sadly criminally overlooked when it released and remained forgotten by most to this very day. Oh, it offered an online multiplayer back then, but if it's still working today is something I can't really tell you, as I have no clue. One way or another, give it a go, it's worth it. Wipeout XL is Psygnosis' futuristic racing game, which I didn't have to tell you, cause everyone knows Wipeout. That said, I have been pondering about Wipeout's success for years now, trying to figure out why it, and not any other game sometimes more advanced technologically or richer in content, became so popular. I mean, if you look at it as a combination of things, of building blocks like sounds, graphic, gameplay and extra features, neither alone is groundbreaking in any way. And what I came up with may be wrong, but I'm gonna tell you anyway. Cause you're here, I'm here, there will be no better moment for it. Also, why the hell not? I believe that Wipeout's legacy is based on, well, how do I call them? Let's say on 3 pillars of excellence. Now, that sounds correct, don't you think? So, first of all, Wipeout, and by extension of that Wipeout XL2, knows what it is. It's incredibly fast futuristic racer, and that's that. No, really, it's it and nothing else. It doesn't try to be a part role-playing adventure or a simulator, none of that. It does its thing, and it does it well. Secondly, it doesn't turn its tried and tested formula upside down. I mean, sure, it innovates, you can't take it from Wipeout, but it never does a 180 on what it is. Wipeout XL, so our today's title, adds support for popular at the time 3D accelerators, different new weapons, more resistant vehicles that can actually sustain a single missile blow now, and energy refilling pit stops. It may not seem like a lot and like an iterative upgrade, but that's a brilliant choice on the side of Psygnosis, as gamers didn't want something else, but more of the same. XL doesn't break what's working with this series and just adds a little of fresh on top. And third and finally, it's fun. And it doesn't forget to be. Some titles add so many new features in their sequels, tons of revolutionary and world-shattering mechanics, often advertised with huge lettering on box covers, covering anything else on it. In the same time, forgetting that most of all, a game should be fun. And if it's not an Excel simulator like Master of Orion or Civilization or any other of the likes, oversaturation of features tends to phase out fun. So yeah. Wipeout is, was, and most likely will be a joyous fare if we ever get to see a new one, even if Psygnosis is Psygnosis no more. Zork Grand Inquisitor is a first-person fantasy adventure and the last title in the 20 years long-running series, which debuted on mainframes in 1977 and ended up in 1997 on our Windows machines. That end, however, was truly spectacular. Not only Grand Inquisitor was true to the series' roots, being full of quirky humor, interesting and fun to solve inventory-based puzzles, and utilizing various spells, but most of all, it was a goodbye gift for all the fans of the series. It brought back many of the famous locations and characters from previous games, all together under the same roof, so to speak, in a comprehensive and plot-related way, never feeling as if it was made just to bait players into getting it, but using all of these assets smartly and to complement the story with them all. And since we're on the subject, this time you have to liberate Port Fuzul and all of Gwendor from Evil Inquisitor's rule that outlawed any and all use of magic, and is keeping citizens terrorized. While the premise may not be the most imaginative and something you've seen more times than your grandpa, the gameplay itself is both charming and fun. even more so with all the iconic locations and characters finally shown in gorgeous high-resolution SVGA graphics. It's not all about presentation though, and in terms of gameplay, Grand Inquisitor does not fail either. Most puzzles are not too difficult, but they're often quite clever, having you think of how to solve them before attempting to do so, especially that you have a whole plethora of various spells to help you. The humor emanates from everywhere, from locations, from conversations with other characters, and even some puzzles. The game was made for you to have fun with, and you will. You will enjoy this bad boy from when it starts to its abrupt end. I was never a fan of original games, as I despise text parsers nearly as much as I despise a demon of a woman that my boss's wife is, and I get the same shakes and shivers whenever she enters the room that I get when text parser asks me for an input. But this, Last Zork, given that it's fully point and click, is actually something I might enjoy. Manx TT Superbike is a conversion of 1995's Sega's arcade original and a blazing fast motorbike racer. And at the time of its release, it really had only one serious competitor on Windows that it could compare to, Belfine Software's Motor Racer. So while talking about it for a minute or two, I'll try to see how it stacks up against it. Spoiler warning, nah, you know what, I think I won't spoil it this time. While Manx TT may not be a demanding game per se, it'll take you a little practice and few races before you start grabbing the top spot. So the challenge is definitely there, especially that the CPU drivers will not hesitate to push you around or straight up block you, which you know, as much as it is annoying, it's also part of the fun. Sadly, there's only a handful of tracks, and while they're bumpy, bendy and all, it's definitely not enough, especially that the selection of bikes is rather limited too. The graphics and sounds look as if they were brought home from the arcades 1-to-1 with no sacrifices along the way, which is fine and all, but, and that's gonna be a Kim Kardashian sized one, I think I've said it in a video or two ago. But by 1997, conversions from the arcades were not as exciting as few years earlier. Our PCs were powerful, often as much if not more than the arcade cabinets, and having at home a simple in its design and poor in features game created from the ground up to eat up coins was not a cool feeling anymore. So, while fun for a little while and a very accurate conversion, Manx TT, when compared to Motor Racer, looks like its slower, ugly brother who tripped on his way home and fell face first in a dog's poo. It doesn't look as good, nowhere near actually. It has way less features, tracks and bikes, but its biggest sin is that its design is rooted in the idea of having to feed it coins, meaning that it was made not to be fun, it was made to make profit, and then moved to PC. And Motor Racer, being the incredibly fun and devilishly fast experience that it is, destroys Manx TT in any comparisons you'd like to pit them against each other. Well, unless it's which game made you feel more disappointed, then yeah, Manx TT takes the cake, easily. Genome is another of those giant robots or mechs if you will game, and as compared to MechWarrior 2, it feels more like an arcade shooter than a simulation. Perhaps for the best, as in direct comparison it wouldn't have fared very well. Anyway, there are 4 races of humans, Darken, Merc and Scorp, and they're in a constant struggle with each other, battling it out in huge robots called HAWS, so heavy assault weapons chases. Things change when Scorp, apparently in secret, is working on a new and super deadly weapon. Genome is divided into 20 missions, all naturally combat based, and will see you fulfilling various objectives to complete them, usually but not always centered around killing enemy units. Interestingly enough, you can eject from your mech at any given point during battle and either carry on foot, which almost always ends up with you being stomped over, shot or killed in any manner of ways, or grab another currently unused mech and use it. Now, this opens a whole slew of other options. You can for instance pick up an enemy mech and use it against them, or change them for the new ones whenever the one you're in is close to being destroyed, provided that there are any to change to, that is. So, as you see, the interesting ideas were definitely not a weak point of Genome. What was then? The controls. They are rather crap because they're incredibly sluggish, and it often feels as if your mech was standing in a puddle of mud when turning. It's a bit disappointing as the combat itself is pretty good. And Genome looks like a protoplast of the later Titanfall games, with the whole jumping off and running around mechanic and whatnot. Graphics are a mixed bag too, with mechs represented in nice intricate detail, looking very realistic, if I can call them that even, and in the same time backgrounds being empty and devoid of any interesting objects whatsoever. In the end, all of it combined makes Genome a very mediocre game and probably interesting to fans of mech genre only. So, if you're one, check it out, but if you're not, feel free to skip it, it's nothing special. Montezuma's Return is a first-person perspective action-adventure puzzle platformer, and a sequel to Parker Brothers' original 2D platformer Montezuma's Revenge. You play as Max Danger. Max Montezuma, though Danger would be so much cooler name. And you're a soldier, and a descendant of a legendary Aztec emperor. You're not as legendary yourself yet though. In the game obviously, in reality you're beyond epic, everyone knows that. So anyway, you as Max are good, but not great, and because of that you cannot save your plane on one of those odd days when you're not at full battery and it crash lands on a mysterious deserted uncharted island. As you explore it, because naturally that's what you do upon surviving the crash, you find ancient ruins and to your surprise, they're Aztec. So, armed with only flashlight, canteen and your stunning good looks, you venture in. Initially to explore, in time, as the game progresses, you'll find yourself restoring the desecrated tomb and looking for the link between ancient Aztecs and the race of aliens. And that's not even all. So, as you see, even if you start as no one in a game, you always somehow find a way to turn its protagonist into an epic warrior slash explorer slash adventurer slash genius slash every woman's dream. I mean, just take a look at the game book. It says everything you need to know about Montezuma's Return, doesn't it? The game itself is composed out of 8 or 9 levels, depending on the release you have access to, and your task in every level is theoretically very simple, to get to its end, period. In practice, it's a bit more complicated. You will fight various enemies, collect treasures, maneuver platforms, trampolines, ropes, water and any other hazards like traps, all the way to the boss room. These always guard the level exit, so have to be killed. There's no way going around them. Interestingly enough, not all bosses can be defeated directly, and they may require a specific mechanic to be beaten. Naturally, as in all good platformers, 3D or not, there's quite a lot of environmental puzzling, so you'll need to find and collect keys to unlock barriers and search for secrets. There are also treasures for points, collecting all of them unlocks access to a bonus stage and fruit that replenish your health. Montezuma's Return is a very competent foray into 3D for the classic platformer and a pretty fun game at that. Pandemonium originated on PlayStation before being ported to PC, and it's a 2D side-view platformer with 3D graphics, also one of the better conversions from the console. Story-wise, the young sorceress Nikki, court jester Fargus and his sidekick the Puppet are the 3 main protagonists. Nikki accidentally casts a powerful magic spell which ends up with a giant monster swallowing a whole village full of innocents. Our trio, as a result, must travel to the so-called wishing engine to be granted a wish to revert the world back to normal. Nikki and Fargus, being the playable ones, are both unique and have their own special style of movement and attacks. Most of the enemies can be defeated by jumping on their heads, and the standard gameplay loop will see you blazing around the levels, avoiding hazards and traps, fighting off enemies, and collecting treasures, power-ups or keys to open locked-off areas. There are different spells among numerous pickups, and they're really helpful, especially when dealing with the pesky enemies. Unfortunately, only one can be carried and used at the time. Pandemonium is really fun, but it's also incredibly punishing. I mean, you wouldn't believe how tough it is unless you played it. It only gives you 2 hit points, and the levels are large, complex and designed to make sure that you'll have ample opportunities to lose them. The enemies are everywhere, and touching nearly anything causes you to lose them. Hit points and not the enemies, that is. It would be cool if they would be dropping like flies upon contact. All of it put together, if you're not a dexterous gamer, can be more than annoying. It's disheartening and tiresome. Worst of all, you can't save anywhere, and the game only saves progress at certain far-off points, same as it did on PlayStation, meaning that each death may require you to replay a considerable chunk of content. And that assuming you won't die again in the process. So approach it at your own discretion. Graphics and sounds are excellent for the time and look really nice and fluid in motion. Cutscenes are well done too and complement the gameplay with short story snippets. All in all, if you're a Giga Chat or a master gamer, check it out. Not many people remember it, but Sonic R is the very first full 3D Sonic game. And it's probably because it was not a platformer, but a racing game, and a pretty decent one at that, even if a bit odd. You could say that it's a competitor to Mario Kart, but with a twist. As other than the racing, a lot of emphasis is placed on jumping, exploration and collecting items, and by doing so, you get to unlock additional characters to play as. The game features 5 unique over-the-top bendy, twisty and secret-filled tracks with multiple paths to them and 4 characters to choose from, initially. As with more and more secrets found, you'll unlock additional 6. As in most kart-like racing games, there are naturally various boons to pick up and or enable. So stuff like speed increase, shields, ability to go across the water or a magnet attracting and picking up nearby rings too. 3 of the characters cannot jump as the driving vehicles, and they are Amy, Dr. Robotnik and Egg Robo. They can only use springboards where appropriate, but instead get additional abilities. Amy has a rechargeable turbo and the other 2 have homing missiles that temporarily stun the opponents. Naturally, there are a few gameplay modes in Sonic R, a racing classic time attack, which is precisely what it sounds like, Grand Prix that lets you race on each of the circuits, and multiplayer that can be played in split-screen mode or over the network, and allows you to either race to the finish line or play in a balloon-finding minigame. Now, arguably, Sonic R is not Mario Kart. But for what it is, it's really fun, especially that with all the unlocks it can actually be enjoyed in single player too. And I usually tend to treat those kart-like games as multiplayer titles only. Graphics are really nice for the time, though nothing groundbreaking, and the 3D models are not overly complicated, most likely to keep the game running buttersmooth at a wide range of configurations. Sounds are decent too. Music, on the other hand, is a polarizing subject, as some love it while others hate it. It's unusual for the racer, at least some songs are, and not everyone's fine with it. I honestly couldn't care less, or actually I could care less, but what I'm trying to say here is that it's fine either way for me. It can be on, it can be off, not important to me, as long as gameplay is fine, and it rocks. While there's no doubt about Panzer Dragoon being an on-rail shooter, oh what a glorious on-rail shooter it is. It originated on Sega Saturn and it was platform seller there. This 1997's PC port is no different. Hardly a platform seller, as PC didn't require any incentive for sales, but definitely an arcade hit. If you like on-rail shooters, that is. It is set in a distant dystopian future where you play as Kyle Fluke and are a dragon rider armed with a powerful weapon and on a mission to get to and destroy the evil and oppressive dark dragon that's trying to gain access to a mythical weapon hidden in an ancient tower. Wow, what a sentence. The story may not be the most sophisticated one out there, but the gameplay is definitely a highlight here, and grabs you as soon as you start playing and doesn't let go until either your arms or eyes give in, or until you complete the game, whatever happens first. A little disappointingly, there's only one weapon that you have access to throughout the whole game, but it's rather strong and offers two shooting modes. A standard one that just pew-pews at all incoming enemies, and charge shot that's executed by holding down the shot and it highlights up to 8 targets before releasing homing lasers at them. You have a certain amount of energy that represents your health, and generally speaking it's best practice not to let anything hit you, as while it only eats away at a part of your health bar, there is no way of refilling it along the way. So yeah, no pickups, no refills, no bonuses, just you, your dragon and an ocean worth of enemies. And you know what? Even if it would be nice to have a bit more variety in weaponry and buffs, gameplay and enemies that you face more than make up for it. There are tons of them. Looking, behaving and attacking differently and going through Panzer Dragoon start to finish is a pure pleasure of rapid-fire destruction. Graphics are pretty nice, not groundbreaking in any way, but won't feel out of place even today. Same can be said about the sound design and music, the last being a bit calmer than I'd expect from an adrenaline-pumping shooter, but whatever. Panzer Dragoon is a blast, and that's what counts. Do you remember when Will Smith still wasn't cancelled and was actually both a respected actor and much less so musician? Good times, right? And remember when he used to play in hit movies like Men in Black 1 through 75, cause there's at least that many, or Independence Day for instance? Yeah, so one of those movies had a game. Correction, most of these movies had a game. But today we're gonna cover Independence Day only. And when I saw a preview of it in my fave game Mac at the time, I was hyped. I mean, I would soon get to fight aliens as one of my favorite action stars of the time. It had to be fantastic, right? Judge me or not, I don't care, I used to like Will Smith's movies, back when they were still fun. So yeah, as I was saying, I awaited the release of Independence Day the game impatiently. And when it finally did, oh boy oh boy oh boy, how it proved that most movie tie-ins suck. It was so generic, repeatable and, well, there's no way going around it boring that you wouldn't believe. Generally speaking, you're going to various cities all around the world and liberate them from attacking aliens. It's mainly centered around blasting their shield generators, occasionally destroying different structures and maybe shooting down some alien fighters. Maybe. And eventually taking down the mothership itself. All in a single fighter, same as in a movie, but many times over. I know it doesn't sound that bad, and honestly it's not. Once, twice, maybe 3 times even, but soon after, it gets old. Even power-ups and warps to secret levels don't save Independence Day from being mid. Graphics don't do it any justice either, they're 3D, sure, but utilize low-resolution textures and low-poly models and generally speaking, look like something from early PlayStation. So you know, fast-flying blocky messes covered in blurry splashes of odd patterns, you get what I mean, right? So, should you play it? There's very limited variety here, gameplay is rather basic and presentation is severely lacking, so no, you shouldn't. But whether you will is entirely up to you. Riven the sequel to Myst is precisely that, a sequel to a cult classic point-and-click puzzle mystery adventure Myst. And for the most part, it follows the identical gameplay formula, uses same control scheme and offers similar presentation, focusing on high-resolution, high-fidelity still images rather than animated graphics. So if you enjoyed the original, you'll love Riven, especially that it starts directly after the first game and continues its plot. You're still in the shoes of the so-called stranger and are tasked with traveling to Riven to save Artrus's wife Catherine. Who is Artrus? Play the first game. Same as in original, the plot is unveiled in twofold by various notes and diaries scattered around the game world and through the environmental storytelling. And if you don't mind rather slow gameplay of it, it's a marvel to experience and engage in firsthand. Riven, its beautiful environments involving puzzles and secrets will keep you on the edge of your seat working it all out, trying to find out about all the developments and shock in awe of unexpected revelations. Once again, if you don't mind slow gameplay, because you have all the time in the world playing Riven. You can examine each location, each diary and each puzzle hundreds of times over and take the stunning and remarkable locations and stories at your own pace. And while it sounds like fun, not everyone's used to such a slow and methodic approach to gameplay with no scripted happenings or time hammers pushing you forwards. You go through it all as fast or as slow as you do. Riven's puzzles are not the easiest to figure out, and I say it with full weight of those words. Some may even feel so annoying to work out that you'd ponder about rage quitting it out of frustration or boredom. But when that happens, take a step back, leave the puzzle aside, walk around the surrounding areas, read everything once more, try to piece together what you learned, and approach the puzzle later on with a fresh head. Cause while they're not for an occasional adventure games player, they are all rooted in logic, all are solvable without any trial and error, and all feel really, really rewarding when you finally do. Details, details, details. Even the smallest ones, easiest to overlook, can make a difference and help you carry on. So don't miss anything. Any little thing that's left somewhere, a piece of trash, drawing, or an object seemingly lying somewhere for no reason, all of them are where they are, intentionally. There's no mistake, no decorations, everything has its purpose. And if you keep that in mind and approach the game with this mindset, you'll be able to complete and enjoy Riven to the fullest. That said, it's not a game for everyone, and if all that sounds like busy work, or even worse, boring to you, skip it and don't even bother yourself with it, it's not a game you'll like. Space. The Final Frontier. These are the voyages of the Starship Enterprise. Its 5-year mission to explore strange new worlds, to seek out new life and new civilizations, to boldly go where no man has gone before. And that's what I expected from Star Trek Starfleet Academy. Well, not really, but that's what I low-key hoped for, in the same time realizing that it couldn't have been done because the game was all about the Academy. But you never know. Naturally, it's not what I got. What I did get though was a, well, let's call it a simulation showing a life of a typical Starfleet cadet, learning basics of leadership, starship flight and combat engagement. All with the hope of becoming a captain. You play as David Forrester, a leader of a group of cadets, and you'll participate in 25 Starfleet crafted scenarios, testing your leadership aptitude and ship piloting skills. There's even an optional famous Kobayashi Mario if you dare attempting it. The game's filled with incredible cutscenes with some legends reprising their roles and meaningful choices between them, measuring how good of a leader you'd be. So you'll supervise your crew and prevent any personality clashes, relieving all potentially conflict situations. And all that is incredibly done and hella playable. But then there are flight and combat missions, and these instantly break the immersion and lower the score of the whole game considerably, in my eyes at least. And I say it as an avid Star Trek fan. You never feel as if you are piloting a huge starship or as a captain issuing orders. It feels like an X-Wing game from a competing space-based universe. Which, you know, generally speaking is not bad, but not how you'd imagine a huge hundreds of meters in length and millions of tons in weight starship to behave. On the other hand, there's no drag in space, so it could be argued that all objects, regardless of their size depending on the power that their engines have, could behave similarly in vacuum of space. And that would be an excellent argument, and good on you for pointing it out. But that's not what we saw in the TV series. I mean, they were definitely no slouches, but not small and agile fighters either. Presentation, so graphics, sounds and music are all amazing and very lore appropriate, fitting the story and setting perfectly. So nothing wrong there at least. If you're a fan, there's definitely a lot to love in Starfleet Academy, but also some things that will annoy you beyond belief and will make you grind your teeth in anger. If you're not, however, then while nothing will stick out as straight up wrong, the gameplay loop may not be interesting for you whatsoever. So, overall, everything other than the flying and combat is excellent in Starfleet Academy, but since it's a big part of quote-unquote Starfleet training, I have very mixed feelings about it and can't just blindly recommend it. Space Empires 3 may not be as well known and beloved as 4, but it's an excellent 4X turn-based sci-fi space strategy in its own right. And while it originally was made as a shareware title, it was incredibly popular due to its depth, attention to detail, and most of all, customizability. And over time, as more and more gamers tried it, it gained a huge following. Space Empires 3 sets you as a leader of one of the intergalactic species and gives you one goal: to win. Now, there are in theory different possible winning conditions, but I don't believe that I've ever been in or heard of the game that did not play out with domination as what everyone was aiming for. And since up to 10 people or 10 CPU players can battle it out on a single system, it can get really exciting and fun. I see those eyebrows raised and odd stares, I do, but really, turn-based games can be hella exciting if you play a good one and have someone else there with you. Anyway, if you're a fan of micromanagement or being able to keep a close eye on everything in your empire and making any and all choices yourself, Space Empires is definitely a game for you, because you'll be responsible for everything here. Exploration and expansion of your empire, military and otherwise. Colonization and exploitation of planets, development and research of new technologies, ship design, fleet expansion and their utilization, diplomacy, including trade agreements, military alliances, war declarations, or even espionage and sabotage of opponents' resources. Everything. And it's not all superficial, but incredibly deep, and the game is feature-packed to the brim. I mean, the research tree alone has 120 levels and numerous technological branches you can invest your time in. Space Empires 3 is gigantic, and unless you played numerous games, you'll hardly get a lick of all that it offers. Combat can be either resolved automatically, or you can choose to play all encounters by hand in a separate tactical battle screens. Not everyone's a fan, but I feel that with the right mindset and a bit of practice, in this mode you can win battles that you would otherwise lost letting them play out without your input. Galaxy map is randomized at each game start, guaranteeing a unique and fresh feeling playthrough each and every time. So, Space Empires is amazing and all, but could it really be a game with no faults? Nope, it most definitely isn't. First of all, presentation. Saying that it's Spartan is an understatement. There's virtually no sound whatsoever, the graphics are very simple, and it radiates that unmistakable sharer looks at every single screen. Sure, it could be argued that in a title that's more akin to an Excel spreadsheet than to a shooter it's irrelevant, and I agree that it's not crucial, but with a tiny bit of attention it could have been much better. Secondly, micromanagement. And it's a double-edged sword. On one hand, it's great if you love it, and on another, when you're in the late game with few others to boot, each turn can get tedious with so many units to issue orders to, and the turns will get longer and longer the more you play. And finally, accessibility, or lack thereof. Space Empires 3 is not the most welcoming game for strategy newbies. It doesn't really teach you anything, the interface can feel overwhelming, and you have to understand its inner workings to fully appreciate it. And that takes time. So, do I recommend it? Hell yeah, I do. Total Annihilation is a futuristic sci-fi real-time strategy and one of the most beloved by fans of the genre title of the late 90s. And interestingly enough, unlike most other games at the time, its story is rather limited and simple, not focusing on the details, but theme and feeling. It's a far-off future of AD 4000, and two factions, aptly named ARM and Core, fight it out in a centuries-long war over the control of thousands of planets. And for the most part, that's it. The galaxy is in a conflict, and you have to pick a side. At first glance, Total Annihilation looks like any other generic RTS, but as soon as you give it a little time, the differences and its unique design will become more and more prominent. Sure, some staples are unchanged from the genre's core principles like resource collection, erecting of buildings and manufacturing of units, but even these are modified to feel new and fresh. For instance, you begin a game with a commander unit, and it's your most important asset in a whole game, as it's the only one that can actually commission building constructions, so it has to be protected at all costs. Then there is resource collection, and while it initially looks similar, soon enough you'll notice that the units getting them are not coming back to base to unload. The game places its bets on tactical combat and not everything around it, so everything's simplified not to get in the way. Units are rather varied, futuristic, comprising of robots, heavy machinery, genetically modified soldiers, planes, ships and all, and they all feel like they suit their purpose great. They also gain experience in combat, and upon leveling to the rank of veteran, they get a considerable bump in accuracy and firepower. The terrain and all of the game in general is in full 3D, and elevation for once makes a huge difference during encounters, so you always want to secure the high spot, if possible. And finally, the presentation is fantastic. Both sounds and music and high-resolution graphics are excellent and fit beautifully to the game's overarching theme and an on-screen action. I'm not a fan of RTSs, it's not a secret to anyone who's been following the channel, but I gotta give justice where it's due, and Total Annihilation was truly a masterpiece in its genre. Remember Raven Software's Mage Slayer from the previous episode in the series? Turns out they released two similar games in the same year, and this, Take No Prisoners, is as good as the last one. It's also a top-down 3D action shooter, similar in its design to Gauntlet, but modernized, not fantasy-themed, and set in a post-apocalyptic dark and dystopian future. You play as Slade, a really cool named tough guy, weapon master extraordinaire, and a heartbreaker professional. Some of this may not be true, and you've been recruited by the Man, another cool nickname, very 90s really. Your mission, should you accept it and launch the game, is to find and recover a special crystal from a mysterious dome sitting somewhere in the middle of gloom and dangerous dark future San Antonio. Yes, the very same one in Texas. There are roughly 20 areas in the game, and they can be explored in a largely non-linear fashion, on foot, using ATVs, hovercrafts, and sometimes even sewer boats. There are around 20 weapons in the game, comprising of anything from assault rifles through flamethrowers and grenades, all the way to pulse cannons, not necessarily in that power order. So the variety is not an issue here whatsoever, and the game has a lot to offer. All enemies are naturally thematically fitting too, and look like nuclear fallout survivors that went mad. And they're all really aggressive. Which fits the whole rundown destroyed city setting that's kept working by small pockets of civilization scattered around it, with dangers lurking everywhere between them. Same as Mage Slayer, Take No Prisoners does not skimp on blood and brutality. The corpses after each kill lie there in pools of blood in various stages of dismemberment, and painting the screen red is not difficult at all, given you manage to stumble across a pack of enemies. and you will quite often. Now, presentation-wise, Take No Prisoners is very similar to aforementioned title, and looks very decent for the time it released in. And since it was a top-down shooter in a time that most games wanted to cash in on the FPS craze, I feel that it definitely deserves a look and playthrough, as it's unique and really fun to mess around in. Oh, and of course there's multiplayer, and it's really cool too. First, there was Desert Strike, then Jungle Strike, followed by Urban Strike and Soviet Strike, and now we've landed on the last and final, Nuclear Strike. Granted, these were all on different systems, but they are part of the same series by EA. Series that started great, and then I gradually lost interest in it, giving it less and less attention with each next title. But that's me, and not a testament to this game's qualities. Anyway, Nuclear Strike takes place in Asia and pits you against an evil Colonel Le Monde, who, for whatever the reason, runs rampant around Southeast Asia and terrorizes the region. Did I mention that he's evil? I think I did. But just to be on the safe side, he's evil. Very, very, very evil. Evil to such a degree that it can be argued that he's stupid. And you know how angry stupid people get when you question their beliefs or opinions. They can get borderline violent. He's no different, only armed with a nuclear missile warhead. Now, how much damage could he do with just one of these, you may wonder? Well, the answer is a lot, depends where he sends it. But in this particular case, this question of yours is not out of place. Cause Colonel Lemonade, and I'm gonna call him that from this point onward, is not aiming to hit any of the major targets in the Western world. Nope, he's evil, he's stupid, but also little smart. I mean smart enough to come up with a terrible plan, but also stupid not to realize the consequences. Or perhaps I'm all wrong and he's way smarter than I could ever be, only bluffing and realizing that the bluff alone would be enough to bring all the nations to their proverbial knees. I think I'm losing it. So let me clarify. He modified the warhead to be launched straight into the ozone layer and explode there, causing a chain reaction and destroying all of Earth's ozone layer in one sweep strike. So, once more, you're sent in your Apache helicopter, armed with Hellfire and Sidewinder missiles, Hydra cannon and Nuke in mind to stop Lemonade from going bad. Oh my god, cringe. But also, so fitting. Anyway, along the way you'll uncover and dispose of a whole net of other dictators/terrorists' nest, and we'll even get to try out other vehicles of destruction too. So, if all that sounds at least a little interesting and you like non-linear arcade 3D vehicular shooters, then Nuclear Strike is definitely something you should try out. The game, not the terrorism, that is. I think I mentioned previously both in my Amiga and those videos that I was never a fan of sensible soccer. Don't get excited and ready to destroy me in the comments, there's nothing inherently wrong with it. It's just not for me. I never feel that I have a full control of the ball and refuse to invest time and patience to learn to do so. So, it's not you, it's me. I mean, it's not it, it's me. That said, I always liked the management part of the sensible world of soccer games. And I know that it's beyond simple as compared to even the most basic Football Manager games, but I treated it the same way I treat mobile games now. So as something entertaining, but not too demanding, that I can do on a side while watching a movie or working. You know, very superficial trash kind of an entertainment. Anyway, Sensible Soccer 98 is a very competent effort at modernizing the classic formula. It features similar top-down view to original, though this time in full 3D and equally as fast-paced frantic gameplay. Also, same as usual, it's maddeningly difficult first and gets easier after a while. I think, cause I gave it like 20 minutes at most back then, and never crossed the "oh, I get it" threshold. Still, from what I saw and read about it online, it's a fun and fast footy that sadly never caught on and never gained the same cult following the original did. Still, if you like football games or used to waste days if not weeks playing Sensi, it may be worth a look. Canon for the release touting that war has never been so much fun, and for a while they were correct. No game could hold a candle to it. Until Worms, that appeared seemingly from nowhere and proved it wrong. Worms 2, as we know it today, had many separate individual releases, Armageddon being the most famous of them all, but before that one released years later, Basic Worms 2 was the king of 1997's couch turn-based multiplayer frenzy, and it was incredible if you had someone to play it with, that is. Everyone knows Worms, right? 2 to 4 teams fighting it out on a 2D destructible environments in turns, using dozens of often crazy and unusual weapons. Stuff like Holy Hand Grenade, Banana Bombs, Street Fighter's Hadoukens and the likes. Naturally, there are quote-unquote normal weapons too, and using them all against a buddy of yours, or even better, few of them, is super fun. I mean, not many achievements in multiplayer gaming are as rewarding as scaling a huge level, all in 60 seconds no less, using only ninja rope, swinging on it like some kind of a budget Spider-Man, excuse me, Spider-Worm, just to carefully place a stick of dynamite between 4 or 5 other worms, then run off to safety and watch the explosion send them all off the screen to their deaths. Or even launching an airstrike that takes down a whole line of opposing players' worms, dropping them all in water in one sweep badass move. The joy that the worms offer is like no other. But, and I'd like to highlight it once more as it's crucial, only if you play it with others. Cause alone, in single player, while it's a decent game too, it lacks the staying power. It's clear from the moment you launch it that it was made from ground up as a party title and it should be treated as such. Anyway, I know what worms are, you know what worms are, and chances are that that dude you met in a grocery store this morning, yes, the one who didn't think he should pay for a plastic bag, he too knows what worms are. So, what made Worms 2 different than the first game? First thing that comes to mind, and is impossible to miss, are the graphics. Gone are the pixels, and high resolution, full of soon-to-fade-away live, beautifully animated worms are in. They make faces, they play around when bored, they're spectacular, if you can call earthworms that. Sure, I have a soft spot for pixels, but it cannot be denied that the new presentation was a natural evolution of the formula and that it had to happen sooner rather than later for the franchise to survive. Then there is customizability. You can mix, match, change and adjust nearly anything when it comes to how the battles would play out. What is and isn't possible, which out of 38 different weapons and tools will be available, when and in what numbers. And everyone and anyone who will give it a minute will find the perfect formula for the games. Other than these two fundamental changes, there are also smaller ones, like addition of new weapons for instance and omnipresent polish. The remainder of the game design is unchanged, so randomly generated levels in 3 different graphical themes, destructible terrain, raising water levels, and most and above all, heaps upon heaps of never-ending fun and laughter. Worms 2 is amazing. Go and play it. Beasts and Bumpkins, even though it was released by EA, is a rather obscure title, as it was only ever dropped in Europe. Officially, that is. Even more so, with really limited advertising. And so that you would more or less understand what it's all about, it's like a mixture of Settlers and Warcraft. And for the most part, it's very fun and charming in its design and looks title. The idea here is simple: expand your village, make it the best that it could ever be, while keeping your population happy and safe, in the same time fulfilling various objectives. So, you need to provide housing, food, water and all the other necessities that the citizens may require. Fun. Oh, and the population grows naturally, you can't kickstart it, you can't quote-unquote build new villagers, you have to hope that the prospect couple would find themselves interesting enough to seal the deal, so to speak, and that the child that will come from such connection would survive to become an adult. Same goes for any other proficiencies. If you want a villager to be trained in a particular craft, you have to send it to appropriate building and provide him anything he'd need for that. And as much as the first few missions in the game are crafted to get you going and used to the formula, in time, with each next challenge, you'll be getting new and more demanding tasks, like retrieving an artifact, destroying an evil shrine or opposing village. And other than the objectives, each new mission teaches you some new in-game mechanic or adds a new feature, like scrolls and such, so that you never get that feeling of stallness and repetitive gameplay that many games in the RTS genre do. In other words, progress is not too fast, allowing you to learn everything at a steady but not rushed pace, and in the same time always keeping you involved with something new and interesting. Beasts and Bumpkins could never rival giants of the genre that came out in the same year. It emanates that shareware feel, while not being shareware at all. It's full of fun ideas, just lacks that last layer of polish. Devdrome is a third or first-person futuristic sci-fi vehicular shooter. Oh my god, what a combo! It takes place in a currently not so far off future of 2057, so, beware. The prisons are overcrowded, as they are even today, and since more and more hardened criminals are sent to them, a situation is beginning to get out of control. The court, so the Committee of Recreation Termination, supervising all the jails, decided to find a solution. And they did, quickly and inhumanly, as you'd expect from dystopian nightmare, in the form of new, extremely fatal kind of a game that pits all the worst of the worst against each other in series of gladiatorial-style vehicular battles to see who could survive 3 rounds in each of the 8 super prisons, all to win back their freedom. So, before you jump in, you have to pick up a so-called runner, which is your vehicle, and there are 8 of these in the game, differing in their stats considerably. Some are resistant but slower, others faster but very glass cannonly, and each and every one has its strong and weak points. Generally speaking, Devdrome is very similar to an earlier game, Quarantine, that we've covered in one of the former videos, just not as good. So, it's your arena-style shooter but in vehicles, with various different weapons and other items scattered around the levels and numerous enemies to dispose of. While some of the weapons are obviously better than the others, so Scorch Missile or Shockwave for instance, you can only hold 3 at a time, so it may require a bit of strategizing when picking armament to be as universal and ready for anything that your opponents will throw at you as possible. There's no way going around it, however you look at Devdrome, it's as simple as they come. Imagine Quake-free Arena and make it simpler in vehicles on less interesting arenas and you're gonna end up with Devdrome. Despite all that, I'm not saying that Devdrome is a bad game, cause it's not. It features pretty decent playing enemies and fun loop if you like arena shooters, that is. And it will definitely provide plenty enough entertainment for at least couple of evenings. Does it have staying power beyond that? Not really, but most arena shooters that aren't exceptional don't. The Great Battles of Alexander is a first in soon after to be Great Battles series of games and a turn-based computer wargame adapted from a physical tabletop game of the same title. It depicts 10 of Alexander the Great's key conflicts as the leader of Macedonian armies, and simulates his tactics and strategies in opposition to the rivaling military doctrines of the time. So you'll face Greece, India, Persia and others, conquering them for the betterment of Macedonian Empire. Or not, cause you could lose too. Though, honestly, being historically accurate, Alexander has an upper hand in most conflicts, so losing is not really that easy. The game forfeits the supply, support, conscription and nation management parts of the warfare entirely and focuses on tactics alone, which has its up and downsides. Naturally, there have been many improvements as compared to the original tabletop outing, like nice high-resolution graphics, individual units animation and automation of very deep and thorough underlying classic wargames rule set, so that the gamers don't have to calculate all of them themselves. So stuff like variance in power of weapons that the different units wield, applied tactics, morale, incentive, momentum and the likes, reflecting real-life conflicts, are all simulated underneath, so to speak, letting you give all of your attention to the battlefield and not waste time running calculations on series of numbers each turn. I'm exaggerating, but only a little. At the time of its release, The Great Battles of Alexander was praised for its sound and graphical design, and most of all for its stellar AI and realistic depiction of conflicts. It can be played in single battles or in a full 10 conflict strong campaign, and also in hot seat and online multiplayer. Rally Challenge is an interesting genre rally racer. Unlike most big rally titles of the time, it had very limited budget and a small team behind it, and it shows. It doesn't mean, however, that it's a bad game, cause it's really not, but so you don't get your hopes up, being a fan of Fast and Furious racing and all, it's not great either. It's a title I would have happily back then paid like a third of the price for, and be content with my choice. As a full-priced game, however, I'd have a lot to say about it, and not all of it would be positive. There's only 3 cars to choose from in Rally Challenge: Proton Wyra, which I'm sure I'm mispronouncing here, Toyota Celica GT4 and Subaru Impreza WRX. That's not nothing, but far from a wide choice many other games had even few years earlier. The tracks, or more accurately stages, can be snowy, muddy, asphalt or dirt covered, making for a fun and action-packed varied gameplay. And you can play Rally Challenge in 3 different modes: Single Stage, which kinda explains itself, Ghost Race, in which you race against your previous run, and Championship Season, which also requires no explanation and is naturally the most feature-complete and fun part of the game. The championship takes place on all 9 stages in 9 countries, Sweden, Indonesia, Australia, Greece and France among others, against 9 other players, human or CPU, and it's played on a turn-by-turn basis, without any opposing races when you're driving. There's few different views that you can race in, and for the most part Rally Challenge is pretty decent. Until you complete it, that is. Cause unlike those bigger rally games, when you're done with it, you have that uncanny feeling of having seen it all and not needing to play it ever again. And sadly, that's exactly the case. When you're done, and you really don't feel like replaying it. And not only for a while, but at all. So yeah, it's a game, it's okay for a little while, but ultimately nothing special. Raiden 2 originated in the arcades. It's a vertically scrolling shoot-em-up and a follow-up to early cult classic Raiden. And believe it or not, it has a plot. It continues it where the first game left it off. It's 3 years since you repelled the invasion of alien crystals, and the remnants of the machines controlled by them have started regrouping to form a new attack army and resume taking over the Earth. To face this new alien threat, the new weapon was developed to repel the scum of the face of fortunately still our planet. The spaghetti-bending plasma ray. Not an official name, I'm afraid, but I feel that it fits. It locks onto the enemies, and while it only deals small amounts of damage, it does it constantly and without the need for aiming, making it ultimately a very versatile weapon. If used properly, that is, as it's a bit of a trap for newer players. It's seemingly easy to use and locks on, and they quickly learn to rely on it, but utilizing it properly is not as straightforward as the other 2 weapons. It's easy to find yourself in a situation where your attack is less powerful than you'd hope. So, equipped with it, along with 2 earlier weapons of spread shot and concentrated beam, various missiles and 2 kinds of bombs, you're finally ready to get rid of the attackers once and for all. And good, cause whenever you come back home from a mission and want to just chill for a little while, regroup and rest up, you know, as you do, there always seems to be some kind of a crisis pulling you straight back into fight. so when this is done, you should take a well-deserved vacation. Playing Raiden 2 will not be a walk in the park, however, as it keeps dropping enemies you at a rapid pace. There's way more of them than in the predecessor, and bosses are both bigger and more epic than you remember. So juggling all 3 weapons, powering them up and making sure to pick the best for each particular boss is a must. PC version of Raiden 2 is basically one-to-one port from the arcades. Sounds and graphic-wise, by 1997, PCs could do most if not all that the arcades could. Raiden 2 beeps, boops and shines fantastically. And I don't mean it only in 1997 fantastic. It was released in a time when 2D was at the peak of what it could be, and henceforth it doesn't look bad or dated even today. Plus, it has that pixel graphics charm that I am so keen on. So I always look at it favorably. If there's one game in this entire video that has not aged at all, it's Raiden 2. Conquest Earth First Encounter is a pretty innovating for the time RTS. I suck at this, so have very limited experience with the genre and not gonna pull a veil over your eyes here, it's one I've never played myself. So keep that in mind. First Encounter is a typical humans versus aliens fare, and this time it's inhabitants of Jupiter, Jovians, that we're after. Or since it's also an option, we're against the pink and fleshy humans. Interestingly enough, if you know at least a little bit, like very superficial basic about gas giants that Jupiter undoubtedly is, then you know that they don't have a solid surface. But whatever, game logic. Both races have increased difficulty at opposing side planets and have to utilize special units that are used to sustain their race's view reach and prevent it from being obstructed by gases. It's an interesting, though I feel a bit busy work concept. But the differences don't end there. While the humans constantly have to invest in new technologies to gain access to new buildings and units to repel the alien scum, better themselves to answer the call, the need for survival, the aliens, or Jovians I should say really, start with most of their buildings available from the get-go. In the same time, they only have one basic kind of a unit. And while it's rather well armored, it's not very strong or versatile. To gain access to better ones, they need to invest in research to teach themselves how to transform these basic creatures into other kinds of equipment. And yes, you did not hear wrong. I've not misspoken. These basic units of theirs, upon scientific discoveries, learn how to morph into other units. Such is the nature of gas-based creatures, it seems. All I said so far is fun and all, but it's an RTS and what you really wanna hear about is combat, and not everything around it, right? Don't answer, I won't hear it anyway. Unless you comment, then I will, so maybe do. Yeah, do answer below. Anyway, the combat is fast-paced, probably one of the fastest of its time, and designed to handle few simultaneous battles at the same time. So, you not only can tell your units to move along the predefined 6-point path, so a patrol route of sorts, but also issue 3 different kinds of attack and 3 of defense orders, depending on the situation on the battlefield. You can also assign units to reserves that would help your patrols if they are attacked, but otherwise will remain unengaged in combat. Additionally, many of the units have finite ammo and fuel, which needs to be delivered to them so that they could work as intended. If that seems like a lot already, I'm not done talking. You can build special units that when sent to remote locations on the map, point of interest or potential conflict spots, they stream video feed of the location to you remotely. You can have up to 3 of those feeds in picture-in-picture mode next to your main view at once to keep a constant eye on a much larger chunk of the gameplay area. This concept alone is so unique that I wonder why wasn't it more widely used in the genre. But I'm not an RTS player and can't tell you how realistically useful it was, it just seemed like it to me. In the end, if you like RTSs, chances are that this one would be something you'd enjoy. I love turn-based strategies and squad tactics games, and even more so, role-playing games with turn-based combat. I know, I'm broken like that. Anyway, Final Liberation Warhammer Epic 40,000 being the representative of the second is definitely something down my alley. And yet, I've never played it. I never knew of it either, so this may be the real reason for it. It is based on the tabletop game Warhammer 40,000 and its universe and tries to recreate the game in digital format. So, all the rules and tactics you'd use in analog version of it are implemented and possible in Final Liberation 2. You are dropped in the middle of a brutal and seemingly never-ending conflict between the bloodthirsty orcs and human space marines. Using a variety of troops, vehicles big and small and giant robots, you have to defeat the enemy forces. The game is divided into 2 modes, campaign and skirmish. And while in campaign you're limited to playing the human side and its linked series of really well thought out and put together missions, in skirmish against the CPU or a friend, both sides are playable, so you get to learn how it would be to stand on the side of orcs. The campaign features a non-linear storyline, where you're fighting to liberate the planet Volistad, and your results in previous missions, and henceforth campaign terrain that you control, directly corresponds to the points you are given to replace or repair units between the missions. The combat itself is naturally turn-based, and each unit can move and attack in its turn. In campaign, you move all units and then turn switch. In skirmish, players take alternating turns, moving only one unit at a time. It's more fair this way, I feel, as even if someone gets the first shot, it's just one and not the whole set of shots. Presentation-wise, while Final Liberation does not offer anything we've not seen in other games, the graphics are clean and well put together, easing your way into gameplay, which is not something that can be said about most tabletop games. So if you're a fan of analog version or turn-based strategy/tactics games at all, you should definitely give it a try, cause you never know, it may become your next favorite classic. Test Drive 4 is an odd one, cause among the sea of other arcade racers of the time, it was actually quite highly scored by the Moby Games users, sold incredibly well, getting close to 1 million copies, and yet I find it severely lacking in most departments. But let's go through them in order. As per usual with me, a completely random and not necessarily logical order. So, Test Drive 4 released onto the market that was saturated by arcade racing games. Many of them good, some exceptional, and a lot of average. Point is that it, not having something grabbing your attention instantly and then holding it for a while, was doomed to fail in my books. And it did, cause for me it has close to nothing to offer really. Well, maybe cars, as it has 5 modern for the time supercars like Jaguar XJ220, TVR Cerbera, and 5 classic vintage muscle cars, with Chevrolet models being the majority of these. All of them feel and behave differently while driving, and all are surprisingly fun to drive around if you don't care for realism. Then there's 12 included tracks, which are rather uninspired and not very engaging. There's no damage model in the game whatsoever. Not that it's necessary, but it's always a nice addition. And on top of it all, there are invisible walls everywhere, on the sides of the tracks that is, meaning that you're not really racing, but bobsleighing, which is actually a viable racing technique in this game. I mean, I'm not implying that you would aim to get off the track in a racing game trying to be the fastest, to be the first, but for the sake of realism, it would be nice if you could. Worst of all, any situation that may happen on the track, be it sliding, spinning or losing control of the vehicle, can be resolved by stomping hard on the brake, which is just all sorts of unrealistic and definitely not a subject for today, but some kind of an advanced kinetic physics video. And finally, the graphics, especially the backdrops and roadside objects, all of which are flat and looking as if they came ported directly from PlayStation, which may actually very well be the case of the lowest common denominator here, as Test Drive 4 released on PC and PlayStation simultaneously. You naturally get to race in single races, time trials and the main mode of championship, which is not that bad, but also nothing that would stick out to grab your interest when compared to other games on the market. And I just realized that I've misspoke, cause there's one thing that I actually enjoyed in Test Drive 4, and I think it was the first game to actually make it right, and it's drag races, with manual switching and surprisingly well crafted as opposed to the rest of the game driving physics. But since it's a quarter-mile race only and having another player there with you is pretty much a requirement for fun, so that you have someone to compete against, it's still not enough to save Test Drive 4 in my eyes. If you played it back then and loved it, it's fine, not trying to change your mind here, but personally, I'd rather play Screamer 2 or Need for Speed. Pandemonium 2 is a sequel to, surprise surprise, Pandemonium with an exclamation mark no less, and more of an evolution than the revolution really. Once again, you're in control of the sorceress Nikki and a court jester Fargus, who naturally is accompanied by his puppet Sid the Stick, so sidekick. This time, however, you're not responsible for all the trouble and commotion. Well, last time it was not you either, but Nikki. But you get what I'm saying. It is the year of cheese. In the game, that is. Because in my household, it's always the year of cheese. In fact, cheese all along, each and every day, 365 days a year cheese. It goes like that. Bacon, then cheese, and then anything else. If you wonder what I enjoy and in what order in particular, I'm a simple kind of a foodie. I like it tasty and not sophisticated. I know, no such word, but couldn't help myself here. Anyway, it's the year of the cheese, blah 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 blah, and the advent of the comet of infinite possibilities containing source of unlimited power is foretold by the great prophet Nos was in it. A cousin, I think, to another of the greats, Nos wasn't in it. So, Nikki and Fargus need to reach the comet first, as the evil goon queen Zorsha is interested in it too, and she's planning on using it for her own devices. So, you're saving the world once again. Only not really, and I lied. Because Zorsha wants to use the power of the comet to bring freedom and happiness to the world, and you're there to stop her. Well, not really stop her, you're there so that Nikki could reach the comet first and become the omnipowerful sorceress supreme. And since Fargus lost his mind completely sometime between the two games, he's just hanging around for shits and giggles. So, you're the evil one this time. Whoa. Other than that twist, mechanically not much has changed. Pandemonium 2 remains a 2D platformer sporting 3D graphics, and it's still incredibly lush and colorful, looking like a Pixar movie. Each of our anti-heroes have their own unique skills that you'll utilize for both platforming and environmental puzzling, and since they're so dramatically different from one another, they almost require you to complete the game twice. If you manage to, as same as the last time, it's rather difficult. Okay, I'm exaggerating a bit here, it is demanding, but nowhere near the same level the original was. And good, cause the first one was a bit too much for me to truly appreciate. I've left the best for last. Back in the second part of the 90s, fighting games fans were divided into 4 groups. Those who still played 2D fighters and didn't care for the quote-unquote 3D revolution, those who fanatically loved Tekken and saw no other games than their favorite, those who preferred Virtual Fighter to Tekken, and finally those who thought that everything I said to this point was stupid and subscribing yourself to a single particular game or a genre offshoot was limiting and childish. And while I'm definitely in that last 4th camp now, back then I jumped between 2D and Virtual Fighter. I didn't care much for Tekken, and to be honest I kinda still don't. But don't tell anybody, I don't wanna cause a riot here. Out of 2 3D games I always gravitated towards Virtua Fighter simply because it had a PC port. Also, I really enjoyed its slower, more technical approach to combat, rather than Tekken's on-screen chaos. I mean, I know and realize that someone versed in the Tekken will not call it chaotic, but to me, an outside observer of the game, it felt uncontrollable. Second Virtua Fighter was a natural evolution of the first game's roots, and it built on the original rather than remaking it from ground up. It takes place a year after the first one, and the World Fighting Tournament is once again opening its gates to the worthy contestants. Well-known masters from the previous outing, so Akira, Wolf, Pai, Jeffrey, Cage, Jackie, Sarah and Lau, and once more, this time joined by the 2 new fighters, Master of the Drunken Kung Fu Shan-Di and Lion Rafali, for whom the win in the tournament means reclaiming his freedom. A stellar cast if you ask me, and a wide choice for those who appreciate good fighting games. Why? Because other than the tad too high jumps that the characters can make, all the moves, attacks, jabs and grabs in the game appear to be rather realistic and possible to pull off with a bit of practice outside of the boundaries of the virtual world too. Most likely because they were based on real martial arts, motion captured using real-life fighting style masters as models and not created artificially for the sake of the game and to be as flashy and explosive as possible. So, being heavily rooted in realism, Virtua Fighter stood out from most other fighters of the time, 3D or otherwise. In fact, that realism alone was probably a huge part of its success. A super smooth gameplay and perfectly crafted kick and punch combos look like fights arranged for the best action movies of the time and not like sci-fi inspired plasma and fireballs shooting out of fingertips bonanza. What most devs probably considered would end up being boring, so technical and not flashy fights, Sega crafted, polished and perfected beyond belief, creating this shiny gem of a game. Most former fighters got few new moves each, and all of them have a stomp now, which while not a finisher per se, is definitely a strong attack on a downed opponent. Not kick to the head maybe, but not far off. If you played first Virtua Fighter on PC, second from a purely technical point of view is an iterative upgrade only. All characters are as nicely animated as before, but they're all entirely texture mapped now and feature a bit higher polygon count, higher even than Sega's own Saturn. Same can be said about backgrounds, which are fully 3D and more detailed than before, but serving their purpose well, meaning being entirely in the background and not noticeable during gameplay at all. Well, that's fine and cool and all, but what really guaranteed Virtua Fighter's success were the controls and how they felt, for the lack of a better word. Every character in roster plays different and requires you to get used to a different rhythm of playing, so to speak. Faster combatants are like a melody in a song that flows with each punch and kick, chaining them into less powerful perhaps, but steady coming onslaught of damage. Slower and stronger fighters are a bass line, less frequent but always hitting with an oomph, powerfully and noticeably like those big percussion drums. And there are those that are neither, and they're like the background vocals mixing lively hits and jabs with slower knockout delivering rhythms. Virtua Fighter is not only a thinking man's fighter, but also a borderline music game, with how it plays that is. Naturally, in VF2 you can expect to find all the usual culprits when it comes to game modes, so I'm not gonna cover them as they're no different than in previous entry, but there is one addition in home version that's not present in the arcade original and elevates it above the competition, and it's the so-called expert mode, which actually records how you play in both single and versus modes and then uses that data to counter your playstyle, to teach you how not to get trapped in repeatable patterns, but to react to your opponent in a natural and unpredictable ways. Not many games have done it then, and not many do it now. PC's Virtua Fighter 2 port is easily one of the best games of the entire 1997, and I say that being a predominantly strategy and role-playing gamer that mostly sucks at versus fighting games. Virtua Cop 2 is same as Virtua Cop, but newer, bigger and better. A typical case for a follow-up, kinda like my father and I. I too am a newer version coming from the same gene pool, bigger, well, currently in weight only, but whatever. I count it as well fitting to my logic here. And lastly, better, cause I am more open to non-conforming people, ideas and worldviews. Virtua Cop 2's basic gameplay is same as in original. So, you're being taken on an on-rail action-packed ride, shooting anything and everything that pops on the screen. You play as the nondescript nameless Cop again, against organized crime buddies in few separate Daredevil missions. The graphics are a bit higher quality and cleaned up as compared to the first game, and PC port is virtually identical to the arcade original. That said, it doesn't shine in comparison to basically any other games on PC, not only looking dated now, but also upon its release. But, and that's the most important thing about it, it's all irrelevant. Virtua Cop 2 is not supposed to amaze you with its flashy presentation, high production value or orchestral soundtrack. Its only mission, bad pun intended, is to get you entertained and or forget about daily troubles. And it does it with flying colors. As soon as you grab a mouse and get going, you'll be shooting the criminals left and right, spreading the cursor injust justice everywhere. Not thinking about your annoying boss or his demon of a wife for that matter either, the sales clerk that gave you too little change, or that dude that cut you off on the freeway, or even the bills piling up waiting to be paid with money you don't have. You'll be that cop on that mission, and you will clean up the streets and end the crime in the city. Virtua Cop 2 is perhaps one of many on-rail shooters out there, but along with House of the Dead, it's the best that the genre has to offer, and an excellent way to get a short breather from everyday troubles. As a matter of fact, I feel that it's a better game today than when it was released. Yep, I do. Crazy, I know, but hear me out. It can be purchased for no more than a couple of bucks or even downloaded off the abandonware sites for free, while back then, at full price, its content to price ratio was nowhere near as attractive. Dreams to Reality is the path I'm on each and every morning, waking up from an action-packed, interesting and often exciting world of Unreal into dark, cold and devoid of grandiose everyday routine. And the same titled game that tells the story of a lone protagonist, Duncan, a man who single-handedly wants to save the entire world from the same reality that I'm facing. Save the world from losing often only means of escape in the form of pleasant dreams, no less. So, 5 evil but incredibly smart, and that's the worst combination of them all, scientists discovered a way to enter the dreamland and shape it to their desires. Now, they aim to take control of all of the human dreams. And you, once more, are the only one who can enter the imaginary lands of the night and save them from being corrupted forever. Now, it should be fairly easy, right? 1. Enter the dream world. 2. Find the scientists. 3. Put them to sleep, preferably eternal one, with use of any means necessary. You have my permission. A simple 3-pointer of a solution. Well, it's not that easy, I'm afraid. Thing is, while you can enter the dreamland, you've only ever learned 10 years after the scientists did. So a lot has been changed, twisted and bent to their will there already. Dreams to Reality is your Tomb Raider, only with ponytail sporting, awful George-swearing, Muay Thai bodybuilder type of a protagonist, and he can run, jump, swim and even fly, provided he has enough of so-called magic points saved up to do so. He, and by he I mean you, will naturally save the Imaginarium by finding the well of mankind's dreams. But to do so, he'll have to travel through over 100 often otherworldly locations, fighting various enemies, initially with fists, later on with found weapons and solving puzzles. Some are adventure-based, most of the time requiring you to deliver a certain object to appropriate dream zone, a person in dreams, so that we're clear, and no, it's not in the lore of the game, I came up with the name myself and I know that it's stupid. And there are environmental puzzles too, like jumping on pillars, platforms, looking for passages and such. Point is, Dreams to Reality is never boring. Sure, it may get odd and bizarre at times, you know how dreams do, but there's always something somewhere to do and you will have a lot of fun going through it all. Broken Sword 2: The Smoking Mirror is a sequel to Circle of Blood and a second game in an amazing series of point-and-click adventure games. And for the most part, it's a tiny, itty-bitty bit weaker story-wise than its predecessor was, but in the same time more action-oriented, if an adventure game can even be called that. Feeling more like an Indiana Jones from LucasArts than anything else. I mean, even the first scene you take part in sees you once again playing as George Stobbart, tied to a chair in the room that's set on fire and a huge hairy spider crawling your way. It doesn't get more Indiana Jonesy than that. But why are you in this, no way going around it, uncomfortable to say the least predicament? Well, Nico Collard, a French journalist George met in the first game, somehow along the way ended up in a relationship with him. And in this second game she managed to get her hands on a mysterious Mayan stone, which origin of they wanted to discuss with Professor Ubia, an expert on Mayan artifacts. It seems, however, that it's way more mysterious than they predicted, and Nico ended up kidnapped along with said artifact, while George was left in a rather comfortable chair in a well-lit and warm room full of exotic pets. Yeah, that's something. So, playing as George, you not only have to save yourself, but also Nico and get to the heart of the whole Mayan artifact mystery too, which will take you on an adventure and a half trying to prevent Mayan prophecy from coming true. And as we know, these are never good. Most of the game you'll play as George, but in the second half Nico will be available too, and with each puzzle solved and location explored, you'll have more and more fun, same as you did in the previous game. Graphics, sounds and music are all on the highest of levels for an entirely 2D production, and the smoking mirror feels like a cartoon that you take a direct part in and can influence the outcome of. It's great. I used to wonder what made the series so popular and so fun to indulge yourself in, and the closest thing to an answer that I could come up with are the puzzles. They're not too difficult, I mean they're not trivial, but at the right level for anyone, even someone totally not versed in point and clickers, just to sit down, play the game and figure them all out by themselves. Twisted Metal 2 is the best known Carmageddon car combat game of the 90s, so the one set on enclosed arenas, and arguably the best game in its entire series, a pinnacle of it if you will. And since violence and sex sells, and since Twisted Metal 2 has heaps of one of these, it sold well and played well too. Calypso, the unofficial ruler of the post-apocalyptic underground world, is staging a worldwide car combat tournament, and you, being the biggest and toughest mofo out there, naturally take part. Well, if you can't relate, you can also be the sneakiest and smartest, whatever works best. You pick one of the many very unique vehicles, cause I can't really call a dude strapped between two monster wheels a car, and head off to challenge others in series of events all around the world. The aim of each match is simple, to be the last one standing. Well, driving, but you get the gist. Each vehicle has its own special iconic move, for the lack of a better word, and you get to find and use various different weapons, so stuff like machine guns, dumbfire and homing missiles, mines or napalm to name a few. And utilizing all of these and your unquestionable driving mastery, you aim to come out on top. Each stage has its own theme, layout, size, numerous destructible objects and often unique gameplay mechanic, like a working subway along with the train in Hong Kong or a collapsing glacier in Antarctica, effectively reducing the size of the arenas as you play, among others. Like most men, I dabble in a little video game distraction from time to time, and car combat games are nothing new to me. So having played a lot of them, I can tell you that despite all I just said, it's neither the vehicles, weapons, nor even arenas that make or break the game. I mean, variety is hella important, especially with prolonging the game's appeal, but not crucial. The two factors that define these types of experiences are the controls and fun factor. And while the first is easy to quantify, so controls just have to be responsive, easy enough to near instantly memorize and ergonomic to use. The second is a bit more difficult to put in words. Hence why I never try, just go by the feeling and the game is or isn't fun. And Twisted Metal 2 most definitely is, and controls are great too if you wonder. So, if you wanna let off some steam or just like those quarantine type games, this one's not to miss. Demon Star. You know where I'm going with it, right? No? Oh well, you must be new to this channel. My boss's wife is a demon star, cause she's more evil, cruel and vile than any other demonic creature that ever existed. Or didn't, because they don't. In fact, when she spawned into existence in the fiery pits of hell, all lava lakes and rivers there temporarily evaporated, as the pure essence of evil she emanated all over was so hot that even they couldn't withstand it. It's also a vertically scrolling shoot-em-up and a supposed follow-up to a much better cult classic Raptor Call of the Shadows. Demon Star was near entirely made by a single person, and that's an achievement in its own right. And it naturally places you behind the steers of a fast and nimble fighter against hundreds of different enemies in a 20-level strong campaign. It's gonna be a bit controversial given the score it received on Moby Games, but I don't think that there's anything particularly special about Demon Star. Other than the high-resolution, often pre-rendered looking graphics, it feels generic in all of its aspects. There are power-ups, but they don't stand out from those found in dozens of other shooters. Boss designs are beyond boring, standard enemies, while differently looking, never seem interesting or unique enough, and honestly, the aforementioned graphics even, at least to me, look way worse than 1994's low-res Team Raptor. But Demon Star is not a bad game. Not at all. The controls are easy and responsive, the gameplay is older, action is fast and frantic, and once you start playing, you'll carry on for a while having fun. And you'll never feel as if the time was wasted. But, and that's a big but really, but it's only cause it's a solid game. Good, but not great, bit better than average, and generally speaking feeling as if it was made following some kind of a how to make a good shooter tutorial. Like everything that it's made out of is there because the document said that it had to be, and not because it was added organically. Naturally, I know that it's not the case, but that's how it feels to me. Demon Star is a game to complete once, maybe twice, and then again in a decade or so. Not like Raptor, Tyrion, Raiden, or even better yet Warblade, that all can be replayed near infinitely. Outpost 2 Divided Destiny is an excellent underhyped successor to its own overhyped first game. Game Dev 2, it seems, is not without the sense of irony. And despite being a really fun title, it was a victim of the first's outings infamy. But let's not judge the title by where it came from and on the merits of where it ended up. Outpost 2 is a futuristic real-time strategy that mixes elements of SimCity with bits and pieces of those found in classical RTS games. So you'll be doing both, building, expanding and making sure that your city is growing, developing and well protected against natural disasters, that the citizens are happy and well taken care of. And in the same time, you'll mine resources and build military units for both protection and to attack too. Story-wise, the remnants of humanity have left dying off Earth after a huge catastrophe, and head off to the stars to find a new place to call home. Since there's not many of them left, however, it's in their hands, and their hands alone, to rebuild and save our species. Naturally, as it's common with the humans and human nature, they quickly started disagreeing, most likely about something superficial, seemingly seeking a reason for a conflict alone, and have blown it up out of proportions, in result splitting into two opposing factions, Eden and Plymouth. And you can control either of the childish factions. Fortunately, the game places much more focus on city building than Kombat, as while the first is rather polished, well executed and deep, Kombat feels a bit like an afterthought, like it was added on in a rush after the game was already completed. I've no idea if that's the case, but definitely seems like it at times. Either way, it's not too big of an issue, as the combat doesn't feel like a main focus of gameplay anyway. Graphics and sounds are rather good, but just that good, nothing out of ordinary or unseen before. And overall, the game was made to woo you with its gameplay and not its presentation. If you like what you're seeing and listening to about Outpost 2, then it may be something you'll actually enjoy. So definitely check it out, as it's pretty fun. Netstorm Islands at War is a real-time strategy that has been built from the ground up as a multiplayer game. The net part of it kinda gives it away, doesn't it? I mean, there is a single-player campaign included, but it's clearly not what it was designed for, I think, because it's an RTS and I've never played it. So, all I'll tell you about it is what I found online. Yeah, anyway. The game takes place in the world of Nimbus, yep, exactly like Harry Potter's broom or the cloud. Which, now that I think of it, kinda makes sense, flying brooms, flying clouds. Where were we? Ah yes, the world of Nimbus, a planet whose crust is floating in the atmosphere divided into thousands of tiny islands, each hosting life of its own in the form of fauna and flora, the earlier represented by the tribes of humans, each of them fanatically worshipping one of the four omnipowerful beings called Furies, representing sun, wind, rain and thunder. And these tribes fight for control of the islands. They do so by capturing and sacrificing the priests of opposing fates, no less. Interestingly enough, Netstorm takes a different approach to combat than most other RTSs do. So, there are three types of units: transport, offensive and defensive, and only transport units can move. Yeah, you've heard that right. Once placed, offensive and defensive units don't move at all and are completely static. Other than performing their functions, that is. The main point of the game is to use offensive units to immobilize the opposing faction's priests and then utilize your transport to capture them and deliver to your sacrificial altar, where they are sacrificed in exchange for knowledge and access to more powerful units. The game ends when all opposing priests have been eliminated, but there are also two other outcomes possible: a draw, or when players form an alliance, and then it's a cooperative victory, which was not something often seen in the games in the genre, and I'm sure that it still isn't. While at its release Netstorm wasn't very successful, in fact it could be called a commercial flop, selling a little under 14,000 units, in time it gained a cult following, and there are even websites dedicated to it and its multiplayer even today, where you can visit and set up games with other like-minded players. Armed and delirious is what my boss's wife is. She is armed with hate and prejudice, and delirious enough to spread both anywhere and everywhere against all minorities or groups she deems different or lower to her own. All that without looking for a valid reason or doing any research on them, you know, at least to confirm that they deserve the hate of hers. But since she's also a person that was born to always be right and never makes any mistakes, it's all irrelevant, because when she does something, anything, in that very moment it becomes valid and correct way of acting, thinking and behaving, even if it wasn't before or still isn't when someone else attempts it. She's that magical. But terrible demon spawns aside, Armed and Delirious is also 1997's humorous point-and-click adventure game. And it really wants to be LucasArts' adventure. Does it succeed in that? No, but it's not ultimately bad, it's just aiming way too high. Like Icarus high. So it flies too close to the sun to sustain the flight and drops to the ground crashing, ending up in a puddle of flesh and guts. Or in this case, ill-fitting pieces of gameplay. Well, the idea is definitely here. You play as a senile woman, and seeing the world through her eyes is definitely an interesting experience and one that's not often touched by other games. If ever. I mean, she has no inventory in the form of pockets, bags or the likes, she keeps everything in her bra. So, braventory. And it's not me, but the game that came up with the term. Anyway, as I was saying, Armed and Delirious really wanted to reach the day of the tentacle quality of gameplay and failed. Not as a game, but by aiming too high. They took what made the classic great and turned the dial to 11 on some parts of it, while considerably lowering it on another. A typical case of misplaced effort. So, crazy over-the-top puzzling, it's here too, even crazier than ever before, but it's not following even the tiniest line of logic, and as a result, it is reduced to inventory, braventory juggling of objects, trying to figure out most of the puzzles in the trial and error fashion, which is not fun. I mean, I can take crazy in my puzzles any day of the week, for as long as I can find a mental connection between the objects and locations to solve them. Then there are the graphics, which are pre-rendered 3D and made to look over the top crazy, twisted and caricature of real life. And for the most part, they do. But some of the sceneries or characters in this early 3D iteration age really badly. I mean, it's not a surprise, but perhaps it could have worked itself out better if it was kept cartoony but 2D. Kinda like the aforementioned Day of the Tentacle was. This is not a biggie though, but rather a personal grief that I have with Armed and Delirious. And finally, the story, which has the potential but lacks the depth that LucasArts always made sure to give their even most simple games. So, you're a granny, and your family has not been the most kind to animals. So as a revenge, the so-called Great Rabbit, a defender of all animals in the universe and a mighty omnipotent being, created a hidden world among thousands of other worlds he created, and he kidnapped your family and keeps them there in a remote, unknown interspatial location. Now, as an elderly woman, long after your best fighting years, but definitely in your knitting prime, you have to set out on the adventure through the series of Great Rabbit-created worlds to save your unworthy family. If you're a fan of point-and-clickers, you'll definitely find something in Armed and Delirious to enjoy, even if not love. But if you're not, then there are better choices to start your romance with adventure games. I love pinball games on computers. No, correction, I love good pinball games on computers. They allow the tables to be more creative and unreal than they could ever realistically be, and in the same time provide the same fun experience real-life tables do, all without choking on tons of coins. So, naturally, I'm always keen on any new games coming out, or old ones in context of this video. Though I have to be honest with you that today in 2024, ever since we have pinball effects, I look at the classics less and less often. It just scratches all of my pinball itches so well that I don't really need to look for any more ball bouncing sensations anywhere else. Still, I do from time to time dabble in the oldies too, and there are some amazing titles within them playable to this very day. And Balls of Steel, which my boss has to have to live with a devil of a woman on a daily basis, is definitely one of these games. It's Apogee's first foray into the genre, and for the first attempt, it's fantastic. No, really, it is. It features 5 unique tables of Darkside, Firestorm, Mutation, Barbarian and Duke Nukem. Yeah, the Duke Nukem. And all of them are painstakingly designed to the last minute detail, and feature not only unique teams from one another, but also their own missions and special bonuses, making Balls of Steel feel like one of the giants of the genre. There are 2 viewpoints to each table, the classic 2D scrolling one, which is most fun to play in my eyes as it's the one I got used to and allows you to appreciate the attention that was given to all the table's details. And there's also a full table on-screen view, and it's not a bad one, but I prefer 2D pinballs to scroll if I'm to be honest. Balls of Steel is a bit easier game as compared to the 21st century's classics, so if you're someone who hasn't played this a lot, or never, it's one of the better games to ease in into their loop and spark up that interest in ball bouncing bonanza. I know how it sounds, and I'm keeping it in anyway. That's not great either. I bet that you thought that I forgot about it, didn't you? But how could I? I mean, imagine forgetting about arguably one of the most important games of the year. Perhaps the most. Not to me, as that would be Fallout, but objectively speaking, chances are that Quake 2 might have been the biggest game of the year, for many reasons. First and foremost, unlike the Dooms of the years prior, Quake 2 is a sequel in the name only. It's a futuristic first-person shooter that drops the story of the first game, now depicting the conflict between humans and the warmongering race of the Stroke. They threaten the Earth, as evil aliens tend to do, especially in games and movies, and to secure our future, it is decided to send our counter-offensive straight into the heart of their own homeworld. A so-called Operation Overlord. So yeah, you're our Operation Special Forces Unit, the best of the best, our answer to Duke Nukem, you. The idea is simple: battle the Stroke in their homeworld, infiltrate their capital city and kill their power-hungry ruler. So, you'll be completing series of completely not covered missions, mowing through what feels like thousands of aliens, fulfilling various assigned tasks in the process. To complete them, regardless of how superficial they are, you'll have to visit series of smaller sub-areas in the bigger overarching levels. And you'll be able to back and forth between them as necessary, making the whole affair less linear than the previous outing and most other games in the genre too. But the beauty of Quake 2 lies in details, and not the overarching plot or non-linearity. All rooms that you'll visit now have some kind of a purpose, they're designed to look that they do at least. So it's no longer a square or oval-shaped room, but if it's a loading dock, then there will be crates, machinery and the likes, mines look like mines, nuclear plants have computer terminals and other objects fitting to the setting, and that kind of attention is omnipresent everywhere and make Quake 2 feel like much more of a game than the first one was. The enemies and weapons too are all more detailed, more varied and much more fun to kill and use. In that order in particular. Quake 2 is what Quake 1 should have been. The graphics are smoother, locations more detailed and intricately designed, enemy models while still blocky by today's standards are top of the range for 1997, and support for 3D acceleration makes the whole experience pleasant to the eye, smoothing out those squares into thousands of colors. So, while the first Quake proved that the FPSs could be done in real 3D, second expanded on the premise, showing us that the 3D could also look great and feel 3D. What do I mean by feel 3D? Well, Quake 2's levels felt much more vertical than those of any other shooter at the time, and with additional side areas, they also seemed vast and exploration worthy. But Quake 2 has a distinct and very fragrant poop-smelling secret. What is it, you may wonder? Carefully checking soles of your shoes if it was not you stepping into something? Well, if you've not played it, you may not know where the heavy stinking aroma is coming from. And it's front-loading, which is a little clickbaity or rather buy-baity in my opinion. Yep, the first half of the game is brilliant. It's action-packed, beautifully designed and has that entertaining flow that keeps you glued to it whether you want to carry on playing or not. And in the second, it drops a bit, with the last quarter being definitely the weakest, reverting a little to a similar design first Quake had. So random pointless rooms with enemies in odd places. But since it's just that last bit, it still doesn't change my opinion about Quake 2 being arguably either the most important full 3D FPS of the 90s or one sharing the podium with 1998's Half-Life. If you liked the video, hit those like and subscribe buttons below. Smash them if you have to, it helps more than you could ever know. Also, I would like to thank you and all my amazing Patreon and YouTube members for helping this channel keep going. And last but definitely not least, I would like to thank all the wonderful folks who record and upload playthroughs, let's plays and other retro-centric videos here on YouTube, because they help to preserve the games that would have otherwise be long forgotten. So thank you.